Councillor Croson, this is sound check. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Thank you kindly.
Welcome to the Lethbridge City Council meeting for Tuesday, July the 27th, 2021. I'm going to begin with the reconciliation statement. The City of Lethbridge acknowledges that we are gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot people of the Canadian Plains and pays respect to the Blackfoot people, past, present, and future, while recognizing and respecting their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationships to the land. The City of Lethbridge is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. We'll now move on to bouquets. I'll start with Councillor Miyashiro.
Nothing today, Mayor Spearman.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Campbell.
Thank you, Your Worship. A few I want to just bring up. Want to congratulate Brian Quinn, who runs Java the Hut downtown. He's retiring for the second time, as he says, to start emptying his bucket list. He brought a lot of vibrancy and uniqueness to downtown, so congratulations to him. Also, speaking to downtown, Mike Spencer of the Geomatic Attic and his Wide Skies Festival that he had over the last couple of years. Of course, it was shut down because of the pandemic, and he has pivoted, which is great, and he's got a concert tomorrow night up on top of the Park and Ride featuring Monkey Junk and the great Leroy Stagger. So again, nice to see people trying to invigorate the downtown. And it was my pleasure to fill in for you while you were on holidays, Mr. Mayor, and a couple of big announcements that came here. Important housing initiatives last week for mixed housing, 64 units, which will be in Lethbridge, and also there'll be 14 transitional homes with the Blackfoot Lodge. They were announced while you were away, and it was my pleasure to bring greetings on behalf of you. So lots of positive things here in the city.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Campbell, sorry, Deputy Mayor, for the updates. Just to add to the vibrancy, I don't know how many folks have been out to the Arts in the Parks events that are happening every weekend in the parks throughout our community until, I believe, September 11th. Big shout out to all the volunteers, all the performers, all the participants who have been braving the heat to come out and enjoy those. The next one, I believe, is on the west side at Nicholas Sharon Park this weekend. A whole lot of family entertainment. Be sure to check those out. Thanks, Mayor Spearman.
Thank you. Councillor Kaufman.
Nothing, Mayor Spearman.
Councillor Morrow.
Nothing, thank you.
Councillor Croson.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. I'd like to give a thanks to the Council of the Town of Coalhurst, who hosted a barbecue last week. The AUMA president was down, and they asked various municipal councils in the area to send 2 reps. As yourself was out of town, the deputy mayor and I, as the acting mayor, went. It was a great opportunity to have some conversations with the AUME president and to bring some ideas back. And I'm sure later in the updates, either myself or the deputy mayor will bring some updates on that. And I also want to give a thanks to the Lethbridge Sports Council and Yiki Yuko for their wonderful event honoring past and present Lethbridge Olympians. It was great to see some of the sports history celebrated.
Wonderful, thank you. Councillor Hagan?
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Spearman? Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Deputy Mayor Campbell had already brought up the two great announcements here last week. They were both able to attend the Cooley Creek Seniors McDinkum Housing Development and the Blackfoot Family Lodge, and just a huge shout out to that. That's a fantastic investment in our community. So thank you, Deputy Mayor Campbell, for bringing that forward. This is great.
Councillor Parker?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And I know some of my colleagues, both administratively and on elected ones, are online right now, but I just want to welcome Ms. Trent and Mr. Fox to council chambers, because I do believe this is your first time in your official role. We're used to seeing you in a box on a computer or on an iPad, so it's nice to meet you guys in person, you folks in person, and welcome to council chambers. Thank you.
Welcome. Happy to see you here. Thank you. I'd like to send a bouquet out to everyone who's getting their vaccinations. As my t-shirt says, this is your shot. This is your opportunity to keep each other safe in the community. We're seeing the effectiveness of vaccines, so everyone who's fully vaccinated, that's thank you very much, and everyone who's doing what they can to care for others in the community, so we don't have some of the resurgence of the variants that we're seeing in other communities. So if everyone can do what they can, we can keep a normal economy and we can have a normal city where everybody stays safe and everybody gets to go to public events, these new events that are coming back up where people can listen to music, people can go to theaters, people can travel, we can welcome tourists to our area. And if everybody gets vaccinated, that's the way out of this. We don't want to go backwards. So thanks, big bouquet to everyone who's doing that. Thank you. And Mr. Let's see. Yeah, we'll do a roll call. Yeah.
So roll call for councillors. Councillor Kaufman.
Present.
Councillor Higgin.
Present.
Councillor Morrow.
Here, but why do we need a roll call if we all went through bouquets? We're all here. Sorry.
It's a formality because we're not all physically here.
Councillor Mayashiro.
Here.
Councillor Parker.
Here.
Acting Mayor Croson.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Campbell.
I am here.
Mayor Spearman.
Present.
Councillor Carlson.
Present.
All the members of council are in attendance.
Excellent. Good. With that, consent agenda from Deputy Mayor Campbell. Be it resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting of City Council held on Tuesday, July the 13th be approved, and the Mayor and the City Clerk be authorized to sign the same. And further be it resolved that City Council receive for information the status of directed resolutions for July 13th, 2021 with the following amendment. That the date of the return for the airport governance review from the Economic Standing Policy Committee be deferred from July the 27th to August the 10th. And that the date of return for Bylaw 6291, a bylaw to repeal Bylaw 6129 and remove the designation of the Bentley Block as a municipal historic resource, be deferred from July the 27th to August the 10th, 2021. And further be it resolved that City Council receive as information the procurement summary report for June 2021. And further be it resolved that City Council adopt the recommendations contained in the following Standing Policy Committee reports. Lethbridge Land 2021 to 2024 Work Plan and Project Expenditures. Operational Review Implementation Plan Update for July 2021. Council Work Plan Monthly Update for July 2021. New Procedure Bylaw 6250. N93 and N94 report back, and Council Orientation and Transition Program Amendment. Further be it resolved that City Council provide the first reading to the following bylaws. Bylaw 6250, Procedure Bylaw. Bylaw 6275, Amendment to Bylaw 3899, Railway Relocation Lands Area Redevelopment Plan. Bylaw 6276, Land Use Amendment Re 8022 2nd Avenue A North. Bylaw 6290, Land Use Amendment Re 310 12th Street South. Bylaw 6299, Land Use Amendment Re 2500 West Side Drive West, West Lethbridge Employment Center. Further be it resolved that Council direct that a public hearing be scheduled for Tuesday, August the 24th at 4 p.m. for the following bylaws. Bylaw 6275, Bylaw 6276, Bylaw 6290, and Bylaw 6299. Acting Mayor Campbell.
Thank you, Your Worship. We'll open this up to any questions my colleagues may have on the consent agenda.
There are questions in the queue. Councillor Kaufman.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Actually, just a very quick commentary on 2.9, 2.8, and 2.7 in that order, if I can. Just for my colleagues, 2.9, we are amending the Council Orientation and Transition Program simply because there was a scheduling issue with one of the external presenters. The date conflicted, so we've actually had a change there. 2.8, with the two recommendations regarding full-time and part-time counselors, we're actually making the recommendation to council here today that we take no further action on those two initiatives, and that would be up to the next council to actually reintroduce or do that. The 2.7 is the real one, first reading of bylaw 6250. This is the procedure bylaw. It'll be spoken to at second reading, but I would strongly encourage members of council to read the bylaw and become as familiar as you can within 2 weeks, and come back to the next meeting of council prepared with any questions, comments, observations, and amendments that you may have on it. Thank you, Mr. Spearman.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Morrow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I'll address this to the Agenda Review Committee, because obviously it's the Agenda Review Committee that sets the agenda. This consent agenda, in my mind, is, for some of us here, we understand it, but for the public, I think it's very, very misleading. So, and sometimes it's very misleading for me as well. Why do we have a consent agenda that seems to be getting longer and longer? You know, we're now into 2 pages. And let me ask if somebody can explain, by approving this, we are technically approving everything that's in the consent agenda. So here's my issue. Where it says, further be resolved that City Council adopt the recommendations contained in the following Standing Policy Committee reports. I mean, I've expressed this before. I think that the Community Standing Policy Committee should be presentations rather than just put into the consent agenda. And then, so it lists all those Standing Policy Committee reports, and then some of them, not all of them, the next further be it resolved says to provide first reading. So how can you be approving recommendations when you are also saying we got to have first reading for these things that we are going to recommend? So can somebody clarify that for me, please?
I'm going to ask the city clerk to clarify it. I think it is part of the new process that we adopted when we created the Standing Policy Committee process. So I'll ask Mr. Sarsfield to comment.
So I'll first start with the easy one first, and that's the bylaws. Anytime that we've had first reading to any of the bylaws, we typically we have always put it on the consent agenda. So this is just a continuation of the process that we've done for many years. In terms of the standing policy committees, that was a part of a process which council adopted unanimously, and we put into our procedure bylaw that any recommendations coming from the standing policy committees be put on the consent agenda. The Agenda Review Committee always does have the option of pulling specific ones out and discussing it further. So for instance, at the Agenda Review Committee, it was proposed that the digital customer service program be pulled out as a submission because it was calculated that there would be a need for discussion on this item. Similarly, any member of council can say that they wish to pull any one item that they wish to debate further. They are welcome to pull them out and be put on the regular agenda. So those options are available to all of council. This process was just established through agreement by council last year, and this is what we've been following.
Thanks for that. So therefore, if I support and vote yes to the consent agenda, I am therefore adopting all the recommendations made and brought forward by the Standing Policy Committee. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Higgin?
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Another question for the city clerk, if I could. We come back to first readings, and it's been something I've been told over the years, and I just want to make sure this is the public is aware of that. So when first readings happen, that's not a debatable thing. It gets it on the table for a public hearing or further debate at a second reading. Is that not correct? It doesn't mean you're in support of or not in support of, but it does bring it to the table to debate. Is that correct?
Yeah, so first reading, all it is a way to get it on the council agenda. There is typically no debate associated with first reading on the merits. That is left for the public hearing and second and third reading. Right. That's where debate occurs. So just because someone supports proceeding with first reading doesn't mean they support the actual bylaw in any way.
Thank you.
Any further questions with respect to the consent agenda? I see none. Back to the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. If there are no other further questions, I will simply call for the vote.
Okay. Question's been called. All in favor? Opposed?
Yes, Joe.
Okay, I think we'll do a roll call vote on that.
Councillor Higgin?
Opposed.
Councillor Morrow?
Opposed.
Councillor Mayashiro?
In favor.
Councillor Parker?
Favor.
Deputy Mayor Croson?
In favor.
Deputy Mayor Campbell?
In favor?
Mayor Spearman?
In favor?
Councillor Carlson?
In favor.
Councillor Kaufman?
In favor?
The motion's carried 7-2.
Thank you. Okay, now adoption of the agenda. That the agenda of the regular meeting of City Council of July the 27th be adopted as presented, including all communications as submitted by the City Clerk. City Clerk, are there any amendments?
There is an amendment to, under closed meeting reports, 10.2. 10.2 would reflect a human resources update. So 10.2, human resources update.
Thank you. This motion is from Acting Mayor Croson. It would now read that the agenda of the regular meeting of City Council on July the 27th, 2021 be adopted as amended, including all communications as submitted by the City Clerk. Acting Mayor Croson?
I'll call the question.
Question's been called. All in favor? Any opposed? There are none. Thank you. Okay, we'll now move on to presentations, and there are none. So we'll move on to submissions. First motion is from Councillor Carlson. Amendment to 2022 to 2031 Capital Improvement Program D6, Lethbridge Airport renovation. Be it resolved that City Council approve the proposed amendment to the 2022-2031 Capital Improvement Program D6 Lethbridge Airport improvements, including the Airport's Capital Assistance Program, ACAP grant of $6,641,700 for additional pavement work at Lethbridge Airport, $738,000 from the Airport Reserve as 10% matching funds to leverage the grant approval from ACAP, amending the grant municipal stimulus program MSP allocations and corresponding totals approved at the June 29th, 2021 City Council meeting from $11,163,000 to $10,353,000. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. If there's any questions from my colleagues, I'm sure they've read the submission. We did recently receive our funding approval from ACAP for the additional work on Apron 1 Taxiway A. We do need to provide our 10% allocation, but I believe that's coming from the Airport Reserve, which has the funds to cover that, and also the recent CIP decisions or the funding decisions made at June 29th council meeting. So this is just on the recent announcements and decisions of council, and we need to amend the CIP so that it matches our decisions. But I'll ask if there's any questions.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Campbell.
Thank you, Councillor Carlson. Just the 11,163,000 to 10 million. The difference, what happens to the difference of the money that's there? Where does that go? Or if forgive me if it's in the package, I didn't see it.
I'll probably ask Mr. Matthews or Mr. Dalton to give
Mr. Kelly's here too. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. One of those three could probably
Mr.
provide
Matthews?
a much better response. Thank you.
Worship to Councillor Campbell. The difference of $810,000 was transferred on June 29th to. Oh, is it on? Is that better? Okay, perfect. Your worship to Councillor Campbell, the $810,000 was transferred on June 29th between the Lethbridge Airport project and to the Festival Square project. It was part of that decision making at that time.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, anything further? I see none. No further questions?
If there's nothing, I'll call for the vote.
Okay, question has been called. All in favor?
Oh, apologies. I did have my hand up for debate.
Okay, go ahead. Debate?
Yeah, not so much debate, but I wanted to just make sure it's very clear. I want to thank administration and airport staff and everyone involved. When we took over the airport, there was a $34 million infrastructure deficit that was identified that we needed to fulfill over a 20-year period. There has been an aggressive action on securing funding, and we have secured funding of $23 million in grants to fund $26 million worth of improvements out at the airport. And there are changes to the terminal parking area, water service, etc. So it's not so much a debate, but thank you to the administration and to the airport staff and everyone involved for the work they have done on helping secure the funding that will completely, in many ways, change the airport. So I will absolutely be in favor of this, and it's great to see some of the work being done.
Yep. Yeah, we would. Mr. Kelly is here. We'd like to thank Mr. Kelly and I think Mr. Gauthier, who put together the ACAP grant application, and everything that we expected to do when we acquired the airport from Lethbridge County, we are certainly well on the way to accomplishing at a very low cost to Lethbridge taxpayers. So the vast majority of the funding is coming from federal and provincial government grants, and that's great news. We hope that our airport will be a magnet and an economic catalyst going forward. And many of these improvements will be ready for when, for example, the food hub is ready at Lethbridge Exhibition, and we certainly want to promote our airport and build our case with the airlines for higher levels of service. So thank you. I echo the congratulations and the thanks to our staff for supporting this work. Thank you. Anything else? Okay, Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Just echo the thanks. And it's been a difficult 18 months dealing with the airport during COVID. But I think when things are back up and running, all the investments, all the work that our administration and the committee has done will be apparent to the users of the airport. So I'd ask for my colleagues' support.
Thank you. Question's been called. All in favor? Are there any opposed? There are none. Thank you. Okay, next we have the Digital Customer Service, DICE, D-I-C-E program, moved by Councillor Kaufman. Be it resolved that City Council approve the Digital Customer Service program as outlined in Option 4 in implementation and Option 1 in completion funding. Financed to a maximum of $2.816 million from corporate systems life cycle as indicated in the presentation. Councillor Kaufman.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. As was identified earlier, this is one of the agenda items that we had in our last governance SPC committee meeting. We pulled it out of consent agenda to at least have a submission conversation here. Long story short, if you use any aspect of the City of Lethbridge website, you'll find that it is on a good day a challenge, and on a even worse day beyond a challenge. There is definitely some missing functionality on the website, and there is a changed environment out there as well in the interweb, especially in the way that customer service, and I don't like using that word because we don't deal with customers, we deal with residents and citizens, but in ways that customer service are provided. Our current website does not do that and will not, under its existing technology, do that. So this is basically a functionality upgrade, updating the technology so that citizens can have a personalized customer experience. You can make consistent financial transactions. Right now we've got a couple of different processes in a couple of different areas, and it's a better opportunity for citizens actually to engage with City Council and administration online. What it will do is it'll take all of our currently disjointed projects and processes and coordinate them, making for a much more efficient and effective customer experience, basically, for our community. As is in the motion, as mentioned in the motion, of course, Governance SPC landed on Option 4, that we will actually implement this as proposed based on City Council's strategic plan, the corporation strategy, as well as the KPMG operational review. This is basically going to take us take the organization approximately 18 months to come to completion, and the financing option was Option 1. Entertain any questions, and I believe Mr. Butler is available for the harder questions.
Okay, questions from council. We'll start with Deputy Mayor Campbell.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is looking great. I think I just was wondering if security being a big issue in the world of technology these days, is there contingency plans based on this presentation at all? Can someone is security a big part of making sure that this goes forward and making sure that we don't get hacked or whatever?
Absolutely. That's very much a core pillar to being able to move forward on this work, recognizing that as a municipality, we are custodians for a lot of the data of our citizens, and the privacy of that is absolutely essential. So yes, securing these systems, we secure them today, continue to ensure they are secure is absolutely paramount in moving forward.
And is that built into the budget as well?
Absolutely.
And is there more money allotted in the event something more serious comes up?
So in the event something such as a breach comes, there's other tools that we have in place, such as cyber insurance and other pieces to respond to those things. But inside of the requirements itself for the product we're looking for and how we'll be implementing it, security is absolutely core in all of the practices that we'll be following.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Butler, while you're still there, it talks about secure financial transactions for customers. Will we be able to improve some of the processes that we use for payments? I think there's some limitations on how customers can currently pay their utility bills, for example, if they're paying remotely.
Sure. So that is the intention. If we look across our city site, there's many payment options across the site based You mentioned, Mayor, the ability to pay utilities. We could also talk about the ability to book swimming lessons and pay for those. And the intention is that we'll be providing an integrated way to be able to do this across all of our properties to improve that experience for our citizens.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions from council?
Yes, Joe.
Go ahead, Councillor Morrow.
Does this involve hiring additional staff?
Not additional staff. If we refer to the budget, we will be desiring to backfill certain positions so that our staff, and that's backfilled through contract, so that our key staff that are here today can work on this initiative and develop it and sustain it. And then as this work concludes, that those contracted resources would be released.
Thank you.
Any further questions from council? I see none. On to debate. Councillor Kaufman.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. I've opened.
Okay. Councillor Hagan.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman, and thank you, Mr. Butler, for all the work that you and your team have done through this. It's a struggle sometimes, obviously, when you look at the dollars that it costs to keep our systems safe. And you know, it's a technology era. It's the time that we're in, and of course, it's something that it's an unfortunate expense we have to pay. But I can only imagine what it would cost if we did not implement an initiative like this. And so, although I'm not really excited about the cost of it, I know that it's a necessary evil, I guess. And so, for that, I will be supporting. Thank you.
Any further debate? I too will support the recommendation. I'll ask Councillor Kaufman to close. Oh, Councillor Miyashiro? Councillor Miyashiro,
Yeah,
go
sorry
ahead.
about that. Yeah, sorry, Mayor. I just want to thank the work that this committee has done on this file. Great job to bring us, I think, into a user interface that'll be a lot better for our community. And thank you for the administration for putting the time in to make it work.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else in the queue? No. Okay, Councillor Kaufman to close.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman, and just to echo Councillor Miyashiro's words, thank you to staff for the work that you've put in on this for sure. If I can just respond to the concerns expressed by Deputy Mayor Campbell and Councillor Hagan, Audit Committee's responsibility is risk management, and some of that oversight actually includes the technological risk involved with being on the internet and our systems, and audit gets an update regularly from Mr. Butler and his people on that, and we do take extraordinary care and caution on these things. So there is a cost to security, absolutely, but this is definitely more about functionality and being able to connect digitally with our community, both the resident as well as for businesses. So I would encourage members of council to support the motion. I'll call the question.
Okay, question has been called. All in favor? Any opposed? Is it unanimous? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to other business. I have a resolution from Councillor Hagan. Parks Operations Funding. Whereas Lethbridge has 2,900 hectares of park land requiring maintenance, which is higher than any other benchmark community, as noted in the KPMG Operational Review Phase 2 report. And whereas Lethbridge has lower average maintenance costs with an average cost of $5,500 per hectare compared to approximately $7,600 per hectare in other communities. And whereas 94% of Lethbridge residents surveyed in the 2020 Ipsos Budget Priorities Survey said they were very satisfied or somewhat satisfied, 61% and 33%, with our parks and open spaces, and 99% said that parks and open spaces were either a very high are very important, 80%, or somewhat important, 19%. And whereas Lethbridge parks and open spaces play an important role in the quality of life for residents, and whereas through operating budget review, City Council voted to reduce the parks budget by $590,500 annually, and whereas residents are expressing some extreme dissatisfaction with the reduced service levels in our parks and open spaces, including weeds and green spaces and medians and lessened dry land mowing, further reducing visual aesthetics of our parks and open spaces. Therefore, be it resolved that Council add $100,000 to the parks budget in 2021 to immediately address immediate concerns, and $404,500 to the parks budget for 2022, both funded from the Municipal Revenue Stabilization Reserve, MRSR, to address resident complaints and concerns, as well as the general aesthetics of our parks and open spaces. And further be it resolved that the City Manager report back to City Council in the fall of 2022 on the outcomes of these budget changes and its impact on the general aesthetics of our parks and open spaces for Council's information. Councillor Higgin.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. I'll open it up for if there's any questions from my colleagues.
Deputy Mayor Campbell.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is for administration. If this passes, can this be implemented quickly? Or are there issues with implementation?
Councillor Campbell, I'll attempt to address that. Practically speaking, it is pretty late in the year to effectively add resources to the budget. And that was communicated to Councillor Higgin, of course, in terms of establishing something realistic that we could actually meaningfully spend and see results this year. There's going to be a two-pronged approach, both which are a little problematic, but we'll have to see if the funding is approved. One is to retain additional labor resources, which is what we typically do, hire seasonal staff and equip them appropriately to do these general maintenance activities. The second approach is to procure contract services, landscape services to do, or general laboring services to do the same work. And I think we'll make best efforts to do that should this funding be approved, so that we can in fact get ahead of some of the things that the community is seeing in terms of our park and open space as a result of our current operations.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Higgin, for bringing this resolution forward timely, of course, in that most of the emails that we've gotten over the last few weeks, if not months, have been in regards to maintenance of our parks, boulevards, green spaces throughout the community. I want to make, my question is kind of the preference of a cause and effect. Is it fair to say that a lot of the issues that we're seeing in our community are not just driven by lack of resources? It could be based on climate, where we are in regards to how dry it is. I just don't want to paint a brush that all this is done, or all this is because of a lack of resources, but there's probably some other causes as well. Am I correct in that?
So the current level of funding, as amended last fall, does put some pressure on responsiveness and sort of the timeliness of getting to the issues that the public is now expressing concerns with. So, yeah, there is a direct cause and effect there. However, the weather and the extreme dry conditions that we've had this year exacerbates the look and the aesthetics, because the community is very brown right now, and as hard as we irrigate certain areas, it's still hard to keep up with try to create green spaces. But the weeds don't need as much water, and the weeds they have deeper roots and ultimately are showing their presence, and they're much more visible in the things like that people are concerned about, medians and dry land spaces and those kinds of things. So the other thing that we have the drought creates an issue for us is actual weed control in the form beyond just in the form of application of pesticides and herbicides. Frankly, they're very ineffective in this weather, so we are not really in a position to try to deal with them, given the extreme dry conditions that we have. So it's really just about mowing. It's about cutting them down, and or in shrub situations and medians, actually having laborers pull the weeds and remove them manually.
Thank you, and thank you very much for that question. And then, so my second question to you, and I thank you for that answer, Mr. Hawkins. A perfect example is if you look outside City Hall right now, and I'm going to put the exemption with where we're putting the new flagpoles because that area has been, heavy machinery's been going over it and all that, and probably irrigation's been shut off. But on the other side, as most people know, when they come to City Hall, the grass is usually green. It looks very nice. People don't even want to walk on it because it looks so nice. But there's dandelions. It looks dry. Is that just because of the climate, or is that because of lack of resources? Would that be?
It's a bit of both. It is not all or nothing. It's this year's weather conditions are creating challenges that we would typically not have where we've seen more precipitation. But by the same token, we have less labor resources available for us to do general maintenance and park maintenance activities. And typically what we would have got done by now is delayed. And so that's what people are reacting to, is just that delayed response for the most part. It isn't a case of that we're not going to get to things. It's just we're not getting to things as timely as we have in the past.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hawkins.
Thank you. Councillor Miyashiro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the mover for bringing this forward. To the mover, do you know of specifically which parks are being complained about the most?
Thank you, Councillor Miyashiro. It's a question coming in from a majority of the parks that I had. I don't have that right in front of me, but it's been from multiple different areas in the community. So calls from north side, south side, and west side, so and the parks that they frequent. So as far as direct parks, there's just been calls and pictures sent in, et cetera, as I'm sure we've all received. And so directly which parks, I think it's majority of our parks are, from what I understand, are going through this.
Right. So I must be driving around the wrong place. I've been biking a lot more lately, and there are obviously in the natural areas it's going to be browner, which they were anyway. However, on the north side there are a number of areas that look like there hasn't even been a drought. They've been watered, they've been trimmed, they've been mowed. So I'm just wondering, maybe to Mr. Hawkins, is there a scheduling difference for different parks? What's the reason why some parks seem to be in way better shape than others? And it's not even depending on how old they are, I think.
We don't discriminate. We're not, at least that isn't our intention, is to pick favorites and do a higher level of service, provide a higher level of service in one area versus the other area. I think our focus in terms of deploying resources is, number one, asset preservation, so to make sure trees and shrubs and are survive, in particular these dry conditions. Number two is to do the maintenance to make it usable space. So to do weed control and mowing and irrigation so that park space is usable. So that's the second highest priority. And then the third priority is more on the aesthetic side. And that's where we're getting the majority of concerns and complaints in the community. It's weeds in shrub beds and established gardens on median spaces. Trimming along backs of fences in dryland mowing situations and even in parks areas. And again, those activities are considered a lower priority. They're aesthetic in nature, and they've been put on the back burner until such time as, which is where we're at now, is that the rush, if you will, the seasonal activities associated with those first two priorities are starting to tail off, and then we'll redeploy resources to those neglected areas. So that's the approach.
Okay, so there's no real reason why some parks are in way better shape than others, or greener, or looks like there's less weeds, or trimmed to a higher standard?
There is a categorization or prioritization in terms of park. Our highest priority parks are our regional parks, Legacy, Henderson, Nicholas Sharon, of course. And then extending from there, it's sports fields are given a higher level of service, given their use. And then the local parks are sort of third on the list of priorities. So I think you would probably observe a greener and a higher level of service in those regional park locations and some of those more prominent park locations. And some local parks are feeling the stress of the weather and the fact that we're delayed in getting to some of these general maintenance activities.
Right. So is it part of it could be a communication issue, that we're in the middle of a drought, we can only do so much. You're putting more resources at things might just be delaying the inevitable or spending good money after bad. Is that a possibility?
That's true, yes. To a point, yes.
Thank you. One more question, Mayor Spearman, to the mover. Are you familiar with the term pork barreling?
No, you'd have to explain that to me.
So what pork barreling is usually happens federally, but it's when just before an election, there's some resolutions or bills or funding is given out in order to curry favor with the voters. It happens every federal election. It happens every provincial election with the government in power. Is this just the case?
Okay, just a second. I don't think we should. I think this is I'm going to rule the question out of order at this point. I just want it questions relevant to the motion. Okay. I think we all understand what the point was, but if we can focus on the resolution, yeah.
I was just answering it. You didn't know what the answer to the question was.
Okay. Anything further? Can I move on to the next councillor? Okay, Acting Mayor Crowson.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Question for the city manager or designate. Have we looked at any other options? Maybe it's because I come from a not-for-profit world where you find ways of doing things. I know the museum in the past and other museums in the area have had crews from the provincial jail help do work. Have we looked to the volunteers at the Lethbridge Horticultural Society? I know they do a lot of work in our parks, but is there anything like that they can do? Like, are there volunteer groups? Have we looked at any other options besides putting more money into this?
We actually, Councillor Crowson, we do currently, as we speak, are deploying inmates from the jail, and they're deployed on these very activities that we're struggling to keep up with at this particular point. Beyond that, I don't believe we've appealed to any other volunteer organizations at this particular point. I suppose that if in lieu of any additional funding, that's something we could explore a little further.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Spearman.
Thank you. Councillor Kaufman.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Thank you, Councillor Higgin, for the motion. To the city manager first, the corporate strategic plan talks about being fiscally sustainable, does it not?
Which plan are you referring to, Councillor Kaufman?
Sorry, the corporate strategic plan. I know that City Council strategic plan talks about financial sustainability. The corporate strategic plan, I believe, does as well, does it not?
It's certainly a principle we would follow, whether it does or not. I can't recall off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you. And environmental stewardship, I know, is again Council strategic plan, and I believe it's also in the corporate strategic plan. And if you can't recall that, that's fine as well. My question, Mr. Hawkins, you made a fascinating statement that aesthetics are lower priority. Can you explain why that occurs?
Again, in the context of limited resources and a finite capacity for labor and material and equipment, we've established this hierarchy that I described: asset preservation, usability, and then aesthetics is sort of third on that list. So, and by aesthetics, I'm talking primarily about weeds. and our ability to deal with weed growth in shrub beds and entry features and along fence lines and those kinds of things. So again, that given our resources, given the way we schedule and organize the work, that's why aesthetics tends to fall lower on the hierarchy of priorities.
Okay, thank you. So in the preservation of the asset, you know, we've had some concern expressed, rightly so, on the amount of foxtail, but that's coming off of private property, not of city parks, correct?
That's correct. Now, having said that, foxtail tends to migrate everywhere, and so we do attempt to control it on public park land and open space as well. But the current concerns that are being expressed in the community are for the most part the foxtail seeding from private property locations.
Okay, thank you. And just to the question previous mover had asked in terms of drought, does Parks Department pivot or shift when we enter drought conditions? Is there something that they do differently, or is it business as usual?
No, I think the obviously dryland mowing resources tend to be available for redeployment because we don't have to cut those dryland spaces as often. I made reference to the fact that during drought conditions, pesticides and herbicide applications tend to be very ineffective. So again, we redeploy those resources to other maintenance activities as well. And we're making that shift right now in light of this extended dry conditions this summer so far.
Okay, thank you. Final question on this then. In a hierarchy of limited resources, financial and personnel, obviously decisions have to be made. Which parks are receiving then a higher priority? Which parks are fine folks in parks actually emphasizing or working upon or maintaining to, as you say, preserve or protect the asset? And which, can you give me an example of a couple of parks at the top of the list and a couple of parks at the bottom of the list that may not receive attention as quickly?
As I mentioned, the highest priority parks are our regional parks. So in terms of making sure we don't limit the resources necessary to maintain the assets and usability of Henderson, Nicholas Sharon, and Legacy as the first priority, that's the case. The sports fields are up there as well in terms of the level of effort that we put on as a priority too. So sharing sports fields, the ball diamonds and in Lakeview, those kinds of areas receive a higher priority. It isn't a case that we're not maintaining the rest of the open space. There is activity happening in every local space, every local park, stormwater areas, open space. They're all receiving some level of attention. Nothing is being completely neglected, but I would suggest that our ability to deal with the aesthetics in shrub beds across the community, road medians across the community, fence line maintenance across the community, those are areas that we're definitely behind in terms of where we'd be typically in previous years as far as maintenance.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Morrow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is to the city manager. City manager, you and I have actually met and have gone out and looked at some sites, and we've talked about this. I have just a couple questions for you. We're referring to Parks Department, and we talk about Parks Department, but my understanding is that in most municipalities, their park department is its own business unit. And here, if I recall correctly, we moved our Parks Department under infrastructure or some other. Is that true? And has that played any effect on the money it receives to do the work in the parks and medians, and as we've heard Mr. Hawkins describe?
There are a couple of options that I'm aware of that you see in municipalities for where parks resides and where it reports, and they're typically either in a rec and culture organization as part of community services, or like we have here, part of infrastructure services. So there are a couple of options. Ours was, my understanding is it was moved to infrastructure service a number of years ago. But no, that would not have an impact on the money it received. Its budget is discrete and allocated through the budgeting process.
Thank you for that. So, and I know, Mr. Hawkins, you mentioned entry levels or entry points into new developments and residential areas and that sort of thing. What I'm hearing more than anything is that developers, or whoever, I think it's the developers that are responsible for the medians in their development or the entry levels into their development. They want to obviously beautify and make things look fantastic right off the bat to attract home buyers. And so a lot of times there's a lot of overkill. They'll plant like 30 trees where maybe they could have gotten away with 5 or that sort of thing. And so if that's not true, please correct me on that. But if it is true, how long does the developer have to maintain and make sure that, you know, anything that doesn't survive gets replaced, or that everything gets watered and that the weeds are, you know, pulled and all that sort of stuff? Or does that automatically come to the city?
So I'll answer that in 2 parts. Our parks planning staff works very closely with the development community and individual developers with respect to landscape designs for not only the local parks that they provide, but entry features and median treatments and those kinds of things, roundabout treatments. So that anything that the developers are in fact providing is signed off, is approved by city staff as part of the development approval process. It is true, it would be safe to say, though, that Councillor Morrow, that the developers in particular at the initial phases of a development, when they're building entry features and building their first park spaces, those kinds of things, do want to do an exceptional job. And that comes with a future maintenance cost. So, but again, that's not done in isolation. That it isn't carte blanche where the developers are just indiscriminately providing whatever they want, and then we're stuck looking after it in the long run. So that's the first part of your inquiry. The second part is regarding the point at which it gets turned over. So we have an approval process, a development approval process that ultimately, in very simple terms, we sign off a final completion or a substantial completion certificate, if you will, when certain work is completed. And in the case of landscaping, that's separately inspected and approved as final completion. That sets a 2-year clock running where the developer is responsible for a full 2 years from the time of that approval to not only maintain but replace and deal with any deficiencies associated with the open space, the landscaping, the park treatments, the entry features, those kinds of things. So there's a full 2 years where they look after it at their expense. Once that 2 years is up, then that gets transferred, just like all the other public infrastructure gets transferred to the city operations to look after from that point on.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager, again, I'm going to refer to, one of our prime buildings, which is the ATB Center, which you and I both walked the area. And you noticed that there was an overabundance of trees planted in small areas, and all the, the areas that are tried, to beautify the area is now nothing but an eyesore because they're being overtaken by weeds and shoots of trees coming up and all that sort of stuff. So my question to you is, do you think that maybe as a city, as a corporation, we need to revisit what we do and how we plant things, given the fact that, we seem to be having more droughts and we seem to be having a problem maintaining, And I'd also like you to share with me one bit of information where you talked about how many staff we have that do the work and how many acres of land or how many park we have. Could you share that, please? And maybe address your thoughts on how we move forward with future landscaping in medians and all these entrances that seem to be causing eyesores.
Certainly. So to your first question, my perspective is the answer is yes, that we need to do some work on the administrative side and think about the long-term implications of the state of landscaping, if you will, and what the cost to maintain that is for the city. And that was noted by KPMG. And so that's something that we have to look at. And in terms of the numbers, it was a number, and perhaps Mr. Hawkins can correct me if I'm wrong, but that was shared with me is I believe we have 2,800 shrub beds across the city and 12 staff, and that results in us being able to address shrub beds, generally speaking, once a year is the information that was shared with me. So that's the scope of the work, and that's linked to your first question. I'm not sure if that's correct, Mr. Hawkins, but that's the data that's on the top of my mind.
Did you want to add to that, Mr. Hawkins, or?
No, the city manager has described pretty much the level of effort and that one aspect that challenges us in terms of ongoing maintenance.
And my final question then to either one of you, to this resolution in front of us today, because I heard Mr. Hawkins, I heard you say that it maybe it's not going to do anything for the remainder of this year. What do you see, or explain to me the benefit of this resolution and how you see this money being spent, and how will this, if we do approve this, what will the average citizen realize from council investing this extra money in this situation?
I'll leave Mr. Hawkins perhaps to talk about what administration might do if council approved this money. I would just start by saying that and I know you're aware, as all of council is, that the service level question is a council decision, a judgment decision, and my interpretation of the resolution put before council is really a question of whether to adjust that service level, and that's a judgment decision for council. I don't know, Mr. Hawkins, if you wanted to expand on what a response might look like.
Again, as I mentioned earlier to an earlier question, if council approved the resolution and there was $100,000 of additional funding provided, we would attempt either to contract some additional labor resources and or retain some additional city staff, seasonal staff, to ramp up general maintenance activities such as weed pulling, shrub bed maintenance, median and rights of way weed control and maintenance as well. That would be the primary focus of any additional resources, and would be about as much as we could practically achieve given the lateness of the season this year. I suspect, depending on I expect it'll be some combination of contract and in-house staffing, seasonal staffing, that we would have to look to in order to cobble together enough resources to make some meaningful impact this season.
Thank you both. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Councillor Higgin.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman, and thank you very much for the questions that have come so far. I do have a question for City Manager as designate. We're talking about green spaces and that's kind of our parks, and I think a lot of the community believe that when we talk about parks, it's just the big open areas, but that's also includes the boulevards, medians, and rights of way, correct?
That's correct, Councillor Higgin.
Okay, so I was talking with an arborist here just a couple weeks back, and he had mentioned to me that sometimes there's the concerns of the different types of trees that we plant, and maybe they're not the right trees, so we're replacing them on a yearly basis, which is obviously takes staff to do that work as well as maintain that. And so and again, as the years go on, of course, you're going to have additional fees when the warranty of that tree is up, if it's 1 year or 2 years, or whatever that may be. I'm just wondering if we've looked at other options as far as possibly they're aesthetically may not look as vibrant and as beautiful as what we currently have with trees. And as of late, I guess about anything is about as beautiful as what we got as of late. But when it comes to say concrete stamping or maybe some I guess I'm just looking at about anything else that we could or we possibly look at that may be able to alleviate some of the stresses that we feel with lack of labor.
So as the city manager had mentioned, and also the fact that KPMG highlighted this as well, our standards are very high insofar as landscape treatments and park treatments, and frankly, those have been established long-standing practices. And again, that's a service level that council can choose to amend if it wants. I think there's no question we need to look at some kind of a balance, a shifting away if in fact operational dollars are going to be limited to maintain high maintenance amenities in favor of, as you described, things like stamped concrete or xeriscaping, more gravel, those kinds of things, as opposed to actual plantings. I think we need to engage the community because just to go all or nothing is not probably a good approach. To suddenly abandon tree planting and or shrub beds and those kinds of things in new development areas, you're going to create a starkly different standard, which people will comment on and could in fact amount to a significant criticism going forward too. So we've got to find some happy median. There's no question we need to take a hard look at it because sustainability is an issue. Financial sustainability is the big issue right now. Is this provision of parkland that we have already, and the extent to which we landscape comes with a price tag, and it doesn't matter how efficient. And we look for efficiencies. We look for new ways of doing things. We look for technology improvements to create continuous improvement opportunities. But at some point, what you have is what you have, and you got to look after it, just like your own home. If you neglect it, it'll only cost you more in the future. So, there's only so much we can do in terms of the existing inventory that we have, but we will look at that. The greater opportunity is as we work with developers and establish some different standards going forward for new space, new open space, park space, boulevard treatments, entry treatments, those things.
Thank you. And in addition to that, we've got some, the drought that we're going through, and of course, being able to keep some of these plants and medians and et cetera irrigated. It's my understanding as well that there's been a concern with getting parts for broken down irrigation equipment as well. And of course, going through COVID as far as acquiring the parts to be fixed, for example, for some of the different irrigation that is out there and the parts needed. Is that a true statement?
There is. We have various ages of irrigation equipment in the system today. And again, the city's getting pretty large. That system is quite expansive. We have, with council's approval, been making some major upgrades like Henderson Park last year. We completely upgraded that system because of that very issue that you've raised is as systems age, it becomes difficult to replace parts, whether in particular controllers and valves and some of the aging equipment that we have. So, but we have a life cycle program. It's funded, again, through the operating budgets and the capital budget in order to deal with those technology improvements and those system improvements over time.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. That's everything.
Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. I guess a question similar to Councillor Morrow. A lot of the comments, concerns, emails, phone calls, etc., that I'm getting are dealing with foxtails, are dealing with grasshoppers, and a lot of those are on empty lots, vacant lots, or dry land farm areas just outside of the city. Is that what Parks deals with? Because my thought is the developer, whether it be the city or another developer, if you've got empty lots with weed issues, you need to be taking care of those, not the taxpayers picking up the tab. So I'm just curious what this 100,000, is it going to impact those concerns that I'm getting from residents about grasshoppers and foxtails?
No, Councillor Carlson, that's the work of regulatory services and a different program. Now, the parks folks are involved in a degree, or the infrastructure services folks when it comes potentially to talking to developers, but that's more an issue for regulatory services in the near term. But there are likely some conversations that we need to have with developers and maybe with some private landowners as well that abut the city, that whose cooperation will probably be required to take a different approach with respect to the two issues that you raised.
And thank you for that, Mr. Dalton, because I don't want to confuse the public here, because what I'm hearing is foxtails and grasshoppers. This is not dollars for those, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Second question, Council recently went through a very lengthy budget exercise where we were very intentional, knowing that we were going to face some fiscal challenges, knowing that the community was going to face some challenges, and we were very intentional in trying to reduce the budget. And we were made quite aware at that time that some of the decisions we made during budget impacted service levels. This was one of them. And it wasn't that we were abandoning, but we tried to be clear that it would just take a little longer. Some of the phone calls I get, and I'll wander out or drive out or walk out to the area, and yep, there is an issue, but within 2 days, the crew is there and is taking care of it. So for me, it's just a bit of a timing thing.
Is this a question or is there a debate here?
No, that's actually just a bit of preamble towards my question, Mayor Spearman.
Okay, I just wasn't sure if we were heading to a question. It sounded a little more like debate, so.
Nope.
Yeah, okay,
it's
thanks.
fine.
Yeah.
I wonder why my other colleagues who did their preambles didn't get questioned, but that's fine. So I guess my question is, City Manager, this looks like trying to address service level concerns, which is an ongoing operating budget constraint. Is the MRSR the appropriate funding source for this, or should this be put into the budget?
If we were going through a budget cycle, I would say it would be a budget question. But given where we are in the budget cycle, the MRSR is what emerged as our recommendation for how to fund this resolution should council approve it.
And I agree for this year. If something comes up and we need to do it outside of the budget that's already been set and collected, but I'm talking next year, $405,000, which looks like an ongoing operating expense. Would it not be more prudent for council to reopen the budget and say, this is ongoing? This is an initiative. If council isn't willing to live with the service levels we set, and we're changing those service levels, should we not reopen the budget instead of draining a reserve to fund an ongoing operating expense?
I'll defer here in a second, but yes, if council made a service level decision, it would clearly be an ongoing operational expense. Whether or not that would merit opening the budget next year for this item, I'll let Mr. Matthews speak to.
Thank you.
Your Worship, to Carlson, in regard to operating budget initiative that we would take into account to build into the base of the operating budget again.
So just to clarify, if we use the MRSR in year 2023, we'll be right back to the service levels that we're in today, correct?
Yes, so what will happen there, anticipating for the operating budget, so this will be set the stage for 21 and 22. But for 2023, it's not in the base budget, so therefore it'd have to be an operating budget initiative at that time. And the MRSR would not be the place that we would typically look at for ongoing revenue source, not for, only for one-time funding, not for ongoing.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Spearman.
Thank you. Councillor Higgin?
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. I just want to touch base on a question that was asked from a colleague earlier to Mr. Hawkins, and we were talking about this is not going to deal with foxtails and grasshoppers, obviously not grasshoppers. Now, foxtails in our parks, I believe you had indicated earlier that if they were in our parks, that this was something that could be addressed, but then I heard Mr. City Manager say that it was not to address this, but this is if some of that funding.
Yeah, just to be clear, the foxtails on public spaces would be addressed as part of an enhanced maintenance plan.
That's all I needed. Thank you.
Are there any further questions from council? Councillor Miyashiro.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. I'd like to introduce a motion to divide.
Okay. Do you have a seconder?
I'd like to divide the parts of the operative clauses that deal with dollars. So separate the $100,000 to parks in 2021 from the 4045 for 2022.
Okay.
The funding source can remain the same. And then if the dollars for 2022 are passed, then you can deal with the further be it resolved. If it doesn't pass, you won't have to deal with that.
Okay, so, okay, is there a seconder for the motion to divide? I will second if there is no seconder. To separate the two budget amounts, one for the current year and the second for 2022. Okay, go ahead with your, any questions on the motion to divide? Okay, please proceed with your debate.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. So I had some pictures from last year, mid-July, and it was pouring rain and the coulees were green and everyone's lawn was green and there were no issues. For us to say we're going to put almost $500,000 towards parks for next year, which is kind of like, I don't know, fortune telling maybe, that we think we might need it next year, but we don't know for sure. That's something that next council can deal with. If there are pressures that we can deal with right now with $100,000 and that we can fix the real problem areas, we're not going to be able to fix everything and make it back to pre-drought conditions, and people shouldn't expect that. We live in a desert. We're having a drought, and some people need to get over the fact that things could be drier. We don't want to put ourselves in a water shortage issue because there's green grass all over the place. That's the most ridiculous thing that we could do. So I think for us to put $100,000 towards parks for the remainder of this year, I don't have a problem with that. And we leave it at that. Let Parks Department deal with that money how they best need to, deal with the problem areas, and leave any additional funding for parks for next year to next council.
Okay. I think we get the point. Deal with the $100,000 this year by this council, and there'd be a second consideration of the 404, which for your rationale for dividing it is that it might be the business of the next council. Okay. All right, so I think we now need to vote in for or against the motion to divide. Okay. All right. So we'll do a roll call vote on the motion to divide.
Councillor Miyashiro.
Favor.
Councillor Parker.
Favor.
Acting Mayor Crowson.
Opposed.
Deputy Mayor Campbell.
In favor.
Mayor Spearman.
In favor.
Councillor Carlson.
In favor.
Councillor Kaufman.
In favor?
Councillor Higgin,
Opposed.
Councillor Morrow.
Opposed?
So the motion's carried to divide 6-3.
Okay, can we deal with the first part, which is be it resolved that City Council add $100,000 to the parks budget in 2021 to address immediate concerns?
I think already opened.
Yeah, you've already opened, and it's still Councillor Higgins' motion. All we've done is divided it, so
Are we in questions or debate?
are there any further questions on the, and this would be specific to 2021? Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Mayor Sperman. Just again, because I've heard differing opinions of what this is going to accomplish. Can somebody from administration tell me if we backtrack and start reinvesting or changing the service levels we've said, what will the citizens see? What is going to be the net benefit of this $100,000 that will start flowing in, I guess, late August? I just don't even know how quickly you can mobilize. So I'm just curious, what is the benefit that will be seen by the citizen on this, please?
So the primary, Councillor Carlson, the primary benefit is that we will, to some extent, on a limited extent, move up, hire some additional resources in order to do weed pull, shrub bed maintenance, and some general maintenance activities on medians and open space areas. That'll be the primary focus, and it will provide some modest improvement in terms of the current scheduling that we have today.
And how quickly will we see any benefit? Is it going to be end of September?
No, it will be. You'll see some of the results in August, late August.
Late August. Okay. Thank you, Mayor Sperman.
Okay, so questions? I just want to make sure that we're dealing with questions and specifically with 2021. Okay. Next in the queue, I have Councillor Miyashiro. Is it questions or debate?
Sorry, I don't think my hand's up.
Okay, your name ended up, magically your name was in the queue. Councillor Parker, question?
No debate, so.
Okay. Councillor Morrow, question?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. So we've been talking about service levels and reduction. Can someone just refresh my memory? What did this council, what was the service level that we cut, and what was the corresponding dollar value to that cut in service level?
I'll help you with that. There were 7 initiatives, reduction initiatives that council approved back in late 2020. I'm not sure. I don't think it'll be helpful to go through every one of them, but the 2 primary ones that we're talking about reinvesting in right now are in reference to A92 from the budget, park maintenance option 1, and A114 general maintenance option number 1. 128,500 for that first initiative and another 198,000 associated with the second initiative. So embedded in those 2 reduction initiatives was a reduction in staff and equipment and resources to the extent that it would, instead of being able to deploy resources early in the season in tandem with all of the other parks activities that weren't going to be affected, it would mean a delay in service. So I don't know whether that answers your question or not, Councillor Morrow.
No, it does. Thank you very much. I was just, I'm just trying to make sure and trying to understand that that council's action during the budget, did we specifically in our cuts specifically directed to this, what we're talking about today, maintenance of boulevards and, you know, Marmograph Drive, Scenic Drive, all the medians and all that sort of stuff? Did we, I want to make sure that that's what we reduced the budget for, and that we're not, is that what it was for?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Parker?
Just in debate still. So.
Okay. Any further questions?
Yes, I have one more, Mr. Mayor. Thanks.
Go ahead.
So is this something totally out of the ordinary that we're trying to do right now, where we are realizing that council made a decision during the operating budget, which you said was, what, 2 years ago, and now we've been getting bombarded by emails and photos and calls and all that? Is this the first time that we are actually adding money and changing our service levels in the middle of a budget cycle, or have we done this in the past?
Is that directed to administration, Councillor Morrow?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Worship to Councillor Morrow. There's, to my recollection, I can't remember a time where we've necessarily done this in the past that comes right to mind right now. However, it wouldn't be inconsistent with Council's directions to actually do a resolution, to actually come forward and make an amendment to the budget. That is one of the things that would be supported through the MGA Act as well.
Thank you. And these two, now that they're divided, both the 100,000 and the 405, these two would only be in effect until the next budget cycle. They would not continue on in the next 4-year budget cycle. Is that correct?
To Councillor Morrow, yes, that is correct. That the way it stands right now, the resolution, it would only be reflective for 21 and 22. An additional, if council so wishes to include this into the service level ongoing, they'd have to make a resolution or typically an operating budget initiative in the 2023 to 2026 cycle.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Acting Mayor Crewson, do you have a question?
I'm in for debate. Thank you, Mayor Spearman.
Okay. Any further questions?
Mayor Spearman, just clarification, didn't we just reopen the budget a few months ago?
We may have, but that's not relevant to the motion.
Well, doesn't that speak to the question that Councillor Morrow just asked? He just asked, have we ever done this before?
He's entitled to ask
for a week in November.
He's entitled to ask questions. They may seem, you know, I just want to deal with the resolutions. That's what we're trying to. Our business today is to deal with the resolutions. Councillors have the right to ask questions and debate them.
Maybe we should give the right answers then.
I'm not going to pass judgment on anybody's question. Sorry. Okay, so now we're moving on to debate. I'm going to ask the mover, that is Councillor Higgin.
Mayor, point of order.
Oh, dear.
Mr. Mayor, point of order. It's Joe. Well, I think Councillor Miyashiro has a valid question. He's trying to find out if, in fact, we have opened the budget before, because I believe we have. And the question that the answer that I received was that we haven't. So I think Councillor Miyashiro's question is very valid, and I sure would like to hear it. Thank you.
Okay. I believe we have opened up the budget before too, but I can't think of the specific instances.
I can if Mr.
Last October.
Well, no, with cause and effect, we've done it usually with the snow removal. We've opened up the budget, we've allocated more funds when there's a situation where we've needed to do that. We've done that actually a few times in the years past, where we've allocated money, how the MRSR, to our snow removal budget when need be, until we did change the policy on where we got the snow removal. So that's another example.
Thank you all, because I do believe we've done this many times, and this is not the first time. Thank you.
Are we ready for debate? I'm going to ask Councillor Higgin to open. We are dealing with one part of the motion at a time because it was divided. So this is about the $100,000 for 2021. Councillor Higgin, go ahead.
I'll stay for closing, thanks.
Hey, Councillor Parker.
I think maybe Councillor Kaufman was ahead of me on the debate.
Was he? How come his name's not in the queue? I'm going by the queue.
Because I was waiting for the debate to start. We had many false alarms.
Okay, Councillor Kaufman, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Thank you very much, Councillor Hagan, for bringing this motion forward. As I understand, we've divided the first operative clause. So on the first part, I'm actually not going to support it. I think we should take the $100,000 and put it towards some sort of environmental sustainability strategy for our Parks Department. We plant a lot of greenery, and as was identified earlier, we're moving towards living in a desert. We live in a semi-arid climate. In the 34 years I've been living in Lethbridge, observationally, it's getting warmer, it's getting drier. And that has a sustainability consequence to our community, to the environment, to the finances of running this organization. And I think continually putting resources towards it to enhance my concern around medians especially, as you're whizzing by them at 50, 60, 70, 90 kilometers an hour, if putting money back into that is a little perplexing to me. We heard from Mr. Hawkins make a statement that our parks folks are prioritizing the regional parks, which is awesome. Then they're getting into the neighborhood parks, which is wonderful. And as was identified by one of my colleagues, the response might not be immediate, and I know that we all expect and or demand immediate service from our municipality. The reality is that we don't necessarily have the resources to meet these demands immediately. And so it might take a couple of days for city staff to actually get into a neighborhood park or get into an area. Yes, we're definitely seeing a change to the way certain areas or certain things look. What could we do ourselves? What could we do as a community to actually help strengthen, help beautify the community? Continually putting money back into it when we're getting emails from sometimes the same people, and I think even more other people saying, can you please do something about my high taxes? Well, it costs money to do all of this. Putting money back into the budget after we had a very fulsome debate, after I consciously put my hands up on parks motions, knowing full well there could be consequence and impact, but recognizing and understanding that we have staff that know their business, they know where the priorities are in this community, and they are doing their best under the conditions to keep up. I can't support putting additional money back into the budget when all of these matters or all of these issues exist in our community. So I won't support the motion as divided.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Parker?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And I have to agree with some of the comments Councillor Kaufman says in regards to moving forward in the future. As we build these subdivisions, we're working with our developers. We may not so much change the level or standard levels, but the expectation of what these things should look like. We are in a dry climate, and everyone would like to have beautiful green bushes all the way along every artery road and all that, but it's not really practical. And I think we've offered a high level of service over the years, and people, even myself, have taken it for granted that we just expect everything to look really nice all the time. And the last year specifically has shown that when you can't maintenance certain things under the certain climate that we're in right now, it's very difficult. And so moving forward, we're going to have to look differently upon how we develop as we expand the city in regards to our landscaping standards. In regards to the $100,000, actually I was hoping it was going to even be more. There's consequences to decisions, and we made some decisions, and now we're not so much paying for it, but we see that people are not happy with what we did. People expect a high level of service. I know we hear in air quotes, well, I pay a lot of property taxes, I expect this. Well, and I always tell Mr. Smith or Mrs. Smith, you know, we have cutbacks and all that. But what it proved to me is people really, really value their green space. They value their boulevards. And even though they are behind right now, and what I've told is it's both climate and it's also regarding manpower. We just don't have the resources there. So I think we made the wrong decision when we cut this back. We didn't realize, it's just like when we cut back snow removal. If we cut back snow removal now, we're all good with that. We cut back the spending, and then come the wintertime, when the roads are full of snow and all that, well, we're gonna have to add more money to the budget because people are calling me up saying I pay a lot of taxes and I want my roads cleared and all that. So it's always cause and effect. But I think this one is timely. It's the first time I've had so many phone calls in regards to weeds, green space, the grasshoppers. I don't know what we can do about grasshoppers. Heaven forbid what's gonna be coming around next week. But we have to be cognizant of what the people expect, but also we have to explain to the community there is a cost to this. I've hosted one meeting with the city manager and some people from the Parks Department, and everyone had a different opinion of what the park should look like. So that's a very difficult situation too. And I'm gonna be hosting another meeting tomorrow in regards to some areas of concern. So I think people have to understand what we're doing, what we can do, and what we're limited to do. And most often people are quick to judge because they don't know what the cycle is in regards to maintenance. So hopefully we can educate the community as well in the weeks to come. But I will be supporting the 100 grand, and and I'm going to speak right now. I'm going to be supporting the other one as well. But my same debate would be going to the next one as well. So I will be supporting this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Acting Mayor Croson.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Difficult decisions are difficult. And we spent a lot of time looking at things when we did open the budget last November and we went through it. And we knew there would be consequences. We knew that people wouldn't always be happy with things. But we also knew that keeping taxes low would support businesses that are suffering in so many ways, would support residents, and it would support the community. And a trade-off between maintaining jobs, helping businesses so that they can hire people, making sure that people aren't losing their houses, etc. And the aesthetics, for me, I can see the aesthetics losing out in that one. We have a lot of things in our community that are underfunded. We know from the KPMG report that we only spend $52 per capita on family support and social services in Lethbridge, when the KPMG average across all the people they looked at was $267 per capita. Medicine Hat spends 4 times us at $200 per capita. Red Deer is twice as much as us at $100 per capita. There are many areas of our community that we could better invest in and put supports into. And as I go ahead, I look at parks as one where, as long as our trees are maintained and as long as the playgrounds are there and as long as we have the sports fields, the aesthetics can be maintained in a different manner. I also volunteer for a lot of organizations, and one of the organizations I volunteer for took a 30% cut in their funding a couple of years ago. It was a huge cut. This is a volunteer organization that only had 1 full-time staff. The full-time staff had to be let go. The volunteers stepped up. And over the 2 years, we have completely redeveloped our entire program and how we do things. And that's what I'm looking for when we make these cuts. Come back with some ideas on how we can do this differently. What can we do that will be better for the environment? What can we do that will still serve our community but be in a much more financially and fiscally conservative way? What can we do to still give our residents the services they need, not necessarily want? I was so impressed with transit when they presented a couple weeks ago. They are making major changes to their organization despite the cuts. And they were honest. They would love to have the money back there too, and they could do more with the money. But what they're going to do is they're going to do what we've asked of them. They're going to make the changes and hopefully make a case. And hopefully when the economy gets better, they will have made their case. And it would be a pleasure at that point for whatever council is in place, I'm sure, to fund them as they have made the changes. And so, as I said, difficult decisions are difficult. It would always be nice to just say, oh, sure, here's the money back. But when I made those decisions in November for myself, I made them for a reason. And I will not be supporting these initiatives, these resolutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Morrow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Really interesting debate and questions. Greatly appreciated. So I just want to make a few comments, and I know the city manager is aware of this as well. First time I received a complaint was actually from many residents, West Side residents, who use Métis Trail, and Whoop Up Drive. And they complained about the medians that were being overtaken by weeds, that sometimes the weeds were like 4 feet, 5 feet tall. The city manager somehow, or the Parks Department, obviously got to this particular area, and they pulled all the weeds. They did all they had to do to, to make the medians look great. So the results are immediate, because the same people that complained to me about the medians and the weeds and how awful they looked on such a main road all the way to ATB Center, they phoned me back and they said that they were so proud of the city that they were able to do, even though they didn't do it all, but they did bit by bit. So people recognize that, and the results are immediate. They may not be immediate in the entire city, but they are immediate where the staff will be working. This is an issue of, first of all, we have opened the budget before. What this to me really is we made a decision thinking it was the right decision, and maybe it is the right decision. But right now, people are complaining. It's gotten a little out of hand, and all they're saying is, please do what you need to do. This is a small amount of money that we are putting in the overall scheme of our, what is it, $450 million operating budget or something to that effect. And we're talking about $100,000. To me, this is reacting to the community's concerns, the community's needs. It's nothing that we haven't done before. We have always done this. We make decisions. 99% of the times we live with our decisions, but there are a few times that people get on and they send emails and calls, and this is a small amount of money, and I believe that the $100,000 will make a significant improvement to the areas that Mr. Hawkins talked about. So I will fully support the resolution.
Okay, any further debate? I'll ask the mover to close.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Appreciate the debate. I honestly didn't think this was going to take the time that it did, but I'm appreciative of the comments, questions, and debates so far. This has been heard, one of the most common emails that we've been getting. And I want to address something that was a few questions from earlier and comments from earlier debate that I don't know if I can support this going into the budget. It's not going into the budget. It's not going into the budget. This is not a budget item. We've already heard this is going to be one-time funding coming from a reserve that has around $35 million. And to address this concern of the community, I think it's a very small amount out of that $35 million to put this $100,000 in there. So being reactionary and listening to the community, I think, is extremely important. So for that reason, I would ask for council support.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask the city clerk to do a roll call vote, please.
Councillor Parker.
In favor.
Acting Mayor Crowson.
Opposed.
Deputy Mayor Campbell.
In favor.
Mayor Spearman.
Opposed.
Councillor Carlson.
In favor.
Councillor Kaufman.
Opposed.
Councillor Higgin.
In favor.
Councillor Morrow.
Favor.
Councillor Mayashiro.
Opposed.
The motion's carried 5-4.
Okay. So now we'll go on to the second motion. Second motion is that $404,500 be added to the parks budget for 2022, also funded from the Municipal Revenue Stabilization Reserve. Are there questions on the second resolution? I see no questions. Do you want to move on to debate? Okay, Councillor Higgin, if you'd like to lead debate on the second resolution.
We'll just hold for closing. Thank you.
Okay. Any further debate on the second part? Deputy Mayor Campbell.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've been vacillating back and forth on this, listening to my colleagues' debate, and we certainly made a difficult decision when we opened up the budget, and a conscious decision to make a difficult choice. This has been an extraordinary year of heat, you know, the highest temperatures we've ever recorded, and the highest temperatures we've ever had in the earth of Canada. So to sort of deal with the situation that we have right now, I was happy to go ahead and see what kind of work can be done with $100,000 as we look forward, and who knows what's going to happen in the next season. That is a considerable amount of money, and we made that conscious decision to cut back then, and I think this is just too steep right now. Again, we could probably reopen next year, but perhaps. But right now, I won't support this second part of the amendment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. I was very close to not supporting the previous allotment for this year because a lot of the emails, calls, concerns I get are around things that is not going to address. And I think we need to be very clear to our community that the previous resolution is not going to address a lot of things people are concerned about with empty lots, vacant lots, dryland farms across from their property, etc. This one I definitely will not be supporting. This rightfully should be a budget initiative, not funding out of the MRSR. Council made a very intentional choice to reduce our budgets in a very tough financial time, making difficult fiscal choices. And we made those choices and we communicated them to the community. Doing a knee-jerk reaction right now, before we've even had half a season to judge the outcomes of Council's decision, I think would be foolish, in my opinion. So I will not be supporting the extra dollars into the future. That's for the future council to look at. They can always reopen the budget if they decide to increase our service levels in certain areas, but it's not for me to judge right now, especially after just a few months of experience. So I will not support this.
Thank you. Councillor Parker.
Well, thank you very much. Well, every decision we make is always based on a future council and tomorrow and the day after. So I think we have to look at it that way too. Actually, I look at it the other way. This is, by doing this, you're being proactive. As Mr. Hawkins just told us, we're playing catch up right now. He doesn't know how much he can solve or fix over the next weeks, if not month to come. But if we put the proper funds in place going into next year, we won't be facing the same discussion. So for that reason alone, I will be supporting it.
Thank you. Councillor Miyashiro.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. I don't think this is a prudent thing to do at this point. This isn't showing any foresight at all. Last July, we were at almost flood levels of rain. As I said earlier, the coulees were green. The river was right up to the base. Would you like me to show you some pictures, Councillor Parker? I see you making faces. So I can show you some
Actually, I just said I thought it was quite dry
like.
last year. So that's all I was saying.
Yeah, it wasn't quite dry last year. This is what it looked like. Can you see that? That's how green it was in the middle of July. That's the coulees. So if we would have based it back then, we would have said, oh my gosh, we don't need anything. We don't need to increase irrigation. We don't need to fix anything because holy cow, it's going to be raining wet the whole time. Next year, if council decides that they need to put more money into parks and irrigation and weed control, shrub maintenance, then next council can do it. We don't need to be soothsayers and try to do it today because the way the climate's changing, we don't know what it's going to look like next July and August. I will oppose this.
Thank you. Councillor Morrow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this is why our community and people get fed up with politics and politicians, because we all do it. We all, if it's in our best interest or something that we want, we will argue one way. We will open the budget, we will add money, we will do what we need to do to get it approved. If it's something that we don't like, we will put up roadblocks by saying it shouldn't come out of MRSR, it's not in the process, and yada, yada, yada. Well, you know what? I think our job, very simple, is to listen to the community. And I'm really surprised that the 5 that voted for the 100,000, even though Mr. Hawkins clearly identified and stated that with 100,000 we can do something. We won't be able to do everywhere. We may have results. I think he said we will have results by the end of August. And so to me, when some of my colleagues are saying that this is not visionary or prudent, we also heard Mr. Hawkins say that the reason we're in this situation today is because we were short-staffed, because we did not allocate. And the community is clearly telling us that. Not only is the community telling us that, we, I'm sure, see it. Now, for us to show glossy pictures of when we had floods and when we had rain and everything's green, it's fine and dandy. If that's the case next year, guess what? We may not be spending the entire $400,000. I trust that our Parks Department and that our city leaders will not just spend money just for the sake of spending money. I trust that. I hope that. But what we're doing right now by approving this 400,000 is we're saying to the city, look, we don't want to deal with this next year. We're setting aside some money from the MRSR. We're not putting it in the operating budget. That's next council that's going to do the operating budget. We're addressing a need that we all know is there. None of us like what we are seeing in the medians, in the boulevards, in the entry levels to fantastic residential development, and especially when you're looking at some of our prominent buildings like the ATB Center. I mean, I live not far from there, and I walk every night there, and people see what they see there, and it's not pretty. And that's our building, the one that we brag about and boast about, and we let it go, the exterior and the everything surrounding it. Instead of beautifying it, it's kind of ugly. So what we're doing, I think, what this resolution is doing is it's just saying, look, we are giving the city some money that if you need it, you need to hire the staff ahead of time. Please do so, because we don't want to face this again next year. And the main reason that I'm supporting this is because of the foxtails, and foxtails are everything. And I have received it. Foxtails, yeah, they might be coming from external fields outside of our city limits, but there are many residents that have pets that have had to spend enormous amount of money for the vet. And a lot of these foxtails are in our boulevards and in our areas within city limits. So for all 5 of you, the 5 of us that voted yes to 100,000, I would be quite shocked if you don't vote yes to this, because this is being proactive and making sure that we don't face this next year. So I urge at least the 5 of us that voted for the 100,000 to vote in favor of this as well. Thank you.
Councillor Kaufman.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Thank you to my colleagues for the debate on this. And I appreciate debate, and the whole idea of debate is for that expression of value that the previous speaker just addressed. We all put a value overlay on this, and we all approach it from different perspectives. Perspective I'm approaching this from is a little bit towards the culture of the organization, something Mr. Dalton is doing yeoman service to actually have an impact upon. How do we affect change in our organization? How do we affect change in our community? We do that in part by budget. In fact, there is the saying that if you want to know what a community values, look at its budget. It's not in our mission statement or our strategic plan. Ultimately it's in the budget, and where and how you put funding. But it's also through the budgets you can affect change. It's through the budgets you can spark innovation, and we're seeing that in some departments. previous speaker had mentioned, I think in the previous debate about transit, how in the middle of a pandemic, there's this pivot to something different, something that has a little bit more value to the community. And that's what's being proposed here. Not by the funding, I guess this is what I'm proposing here by not supporting this, is that how we try to get off this whole roller coaster of continually greenifying our community, to create a new word, I guess, we actually have to put some challenge in front of the organization to say, can you take a step back and think? Can you think about this? We've seen in the KPMG report quite a bit of verbiage around parks and the way that we do things. And we've built a beautiful green community. But where's the sustainability in this? If we continue to fund parks, we put the money back in even for 2022, and we've all been around this roller coaster before. We know we're going to see it. You'd see it in the next budget as well, because once it's in, it tends to stay unless somebody wants to pull it out. We're not going to get off the addiction. We're not going to get off the addiction of putting all of this green infrastructure in, whether it's in the boulevards, it's in the medians, it's in the entryways to communities. We have to take a step back and think. And I would hope that our Parks Department, when they saw the outcome of the debate that we had back in November around the budget, I would hope the Parks Department took a step back and said, okay, how can we let's start with the same with less. How can we maybe do more with less? What should we be doing in our practices and our behaviors? I think a strong department would find the opportunity in that. Maybe we need to cut back in the number of trees we plant. Maybe we need to find trees that are more hardy. Maybe we need to be planting more native grasses, doing more xeriscaping instead of creating greenery into subdivisions and in the public spaces. Maybe there needs to be greater emphasis put on the regional parks and on the neighborhood parks, put more money and more focus on the places where people live, the places where people gather, as opposed to the places where people whip by at 60, 70, 80 kilometers an hour. But the only way that we're going to affect change is actually by making a statement. And the statement that I believe we made back in November of last year was, we'd like to see change in how our parks are operated. We'd like to see change in what we do in our parks. And this is intended, I would hope, would be received as being motivation, as opposed to, well, maybe we'll put out a press release just complaining about parks, and maybe we'll push it through council a little bit harder and try to get funding back. I'm hoping that that's not in the process, but it can lead one to believe that. So what I think we need to be doing is we need to be holding to our position from back in November. We hopefully have all expressed how we're feeling on this, and I would certainly hope Mr. Hawkins and his staff have heard the message loud and clear that there are priorities, is an emphasis. But I also hope that the community understands, too, that we have to be sustainable with the environment. We have to be sustainable with the dollars. We have to be sustainable with our human resources within the organization. And that's only going to happen through some very tough decisions and some very difficult times. We're seeing it in climate. We're seeing it in our finances. We're seeing it in our society. We're going through these right now. So I cannot support the second part of this motion either. And I hope that somebody is listening to the messages that we're sending, and innovation, creativity, new ideas, and new approaches can be incorporated into the organization to make this a community that can be sustainable on all fronts. So I will not be supporting the motion.
Thank you. Acting Mayor Croson.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. I appreciate speaking after Councillor Kaufman, because in many ways I can just say ditto, because he spoke so eloquently and said many of the things that I've been thinking. Change is hard. Making hard decisions is hard, and sticking to them is sometimes even more difficult. But it does force us to look at different ideas. As we know, a lot of the foxtail issues are on private land. They're not necessarily in the city land. But when people are concerned about that, it got me looking and researching and thinking. And there are other ways of approaching it. Foxtail is not on the weeds list for the province of Alberta. Perhaps it should be. Maybe that's something we can do. It is on Saskatchewan's. And so if you look at the city of Saskatoon, they have an amazing pamphlet called Foxtail Be Gone. It's a guide to preventing and controlling foxtail barley. Gives ideas on how to work, how to help make sure your animals are protected, how to make sure it's protected in private property, etc., and has various resources. if we continue to do things just as we are, we would never think about making a brochure like this. And when you do difficult change, sometimes you have to motivate that change, and sometimes you have to encourage that change. And as Councillor Kaufman said, one of the ways you encourage change and motivate looking at things differently is through the budget. And I cannot support putting more money back into parks. As I mentioned earlier in the transit comment I made, if I see changes, if things are, people are looking at this in a more climate change way, if we're looking at new options, if we are thinking about things differently, and then parks, we're to come back and say, we have these great ideas, but we need money to do it, that would be a different discussion. Going back on a decision that is made is not something I can do at this time. Thank you, Mayor Spearman.
Okay, thank you. I too agree. We made difficult decisions. The pressure was on to basically try to reduce or freeze taxes, and I think council did that well. And whenever there are, inevitably there are service level reductions, and I would welcome new opportunities, new ways of doing things better. And by putting the money back, we simply restore the programs that we had before. So I hope that if the money is reduced, we can spend it better and more effectively, and we can have programs like Foxdale be gone. So I would hope that we can encourage innovation in the future, and I don't want to make a decision for the next council. So if the next council wants to begin putting money back into the budget, they can choose to do that. Our mandate was to try and freeze taxes and with a minimal impact on services. And for those reasons, I can't support the resolution. Any further debate? I'll ask Councillor Higgin to close.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Thank you very much, my colleagues, for your debate, and through this time that we've been here discussing this. We've asked to freeze taxes, and again, I'm going back to this is not on the budget. This is not affecting taxes. It is, again, come from a $35 million surplus because we've already overtaxed. And so putting $100,000 into the first product and then $404,500 into the next year, we're going to leave it to the next council. Here's the issue I've got. The next council comes in here, and we make decisions always for future councils. Next council comes in, it's going to be about this time, June, July. Hey, you know what? We should be doing something. It's now too late. We want to get on this sooner than later. We don't know what the weather's going to look like. We don't know how dry the summer's going to be. So being proactive rather than reactive is extremely important. Rather than visiting this at a time that we're already in the middle of the concern. Now, I just want to touch base. We're talking about this foxtail, and it seems to be the conversation that comes up. Now, I take my dogs for walks. I take them in community parks, most always in community parks. We've heard that this is going to do some help within the community parks if there's foxtail. If we put this funding in there now and next year, this could save. It's really easy to say, well, we need to take care of our dogs better. We got to watch where they go. Dogs are dogs. We're in community parks. And tell that to the people that are spending thousands of dollars on vet bills for their dogs, their animals that have ingested this foxtail. Again, this isn't all about foxtail, but I know we seem to be coming back to this. And it's just, I'm just a little, I guess, exhausted with some of the remarks, but I understand we're here. We're not all going to think the same way sitting around this horseshoe. And that's good. That's democracy. It's important. So I won't say a lot more on this. We've belabored it for quite some time, but there's been incredible questions and discussion, so I'm appreciative of that. But I would ask that council would support this and be proactive rather than reactive.
Okay, question's been called. I'll ask the city clerk to do a roll call vote, please.
Thank you. Acting Mayor.
Mayor Spearman, sorry, before we begin, I just need clarification on a statement made by Councillor Higgin in his close. He said a $35 million surplus. I'm just wondering if he meant that.
$35 million in the MRSRM, sorry. That's in the
okay.
reserves.
Yes, There's a difference. I just wanted to be sure that it was just a misspeak as opposed to
Yes.
an actual factual statement. Okay.
Totally.
Thank you.
35 million
Sorry,
in the reserves. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the roll call, Acting Mayor Croson,
Opposed.
Deputy Mayor Campbell,
Opposed.
Mayor Spearman,
Opposed.
Councillor Carlson,
Opposed.
Councillor Kaufman,
Opposed.
Councillor Higgin,
In favor.
Councillor Morrow,
Favor?
Councillor Mayashiro,
Opposed?
Councillor Parker.
Favor.
The motion's lost 3-6.
Okay, the final portion of the resolution is, be it resolved that the city manager report back to council in the fall of 2022 on the outcomes of the budget changes and its impact on general aesthetics of our parks and open spaces for council's information. So that's the $100,000 that was previously approved by council. So, Councillor Higgin, you want?
Mr. Mayor, why are we deciding that? Isn't that already voted on and part of the resolution?
I think we just voted on the 100,000. That wasn't included.
Okay.
So we'd have to approve
explanation.
this if you want to report back in the fall from the city manager on the impact of spending the
sorry.
extra 100,000.
I call for the vote.
Hey, Councillor Higgin is just calling for the vote. I'll just check to make sure there's no questions. Does anyone want to debate this component? I hear no, so the question has been called. All in favor?
Councillor Carlson.
Sorry. Mayor Spearman, sorry, I don't know if it's a function of the app that we're using or not, but the report says to report back in 2022 currently,
Yes.
in the fall.
Yes, the impact of the $100,000 that we approved previously.
Okay, thank you. I was wondering if that should or could be, and this is just a question, earlier than fall 22. I believe the original was assuming that the extra 100 and the extra 400 was spent, and the report on that, since we're just spending or approved the 100, could next council get a report earlier than fall 2022 in case they want to make some changes to their process? That's my only question.
Legally, next council's sworn in on the 25th of October, something like that. So first regular council meeting, I'm not sure when that is.
November 16th.
November 16th is the earliest.
I was contemplating spring 2022, but it's up to the mover. I just thought I'd raise that suggestion.
I'm okay with that. Spring 2022, sure.
Okay, it's the mover's resolution. If he wishes it to be changed and there's no objection. Do you want to have it spring of 2022?
That's just fine. It does make sense that if it was going to be the 404,500, then that would be fine to be reported in the fall. So spring 2022 for this year would be fine. Sure, you bet.
Okay, so the mover is changing that to the spring of 2022. Or is there any objection from council? I hear none. Okay. If everybody's waiving further questions and waiving debate, we can vote on that. All in favor? Any opposed? That is unanimous. you want to go on to 6.2, or do you want to take a break at this point? We have a public hearing in 22 minutes. Continue? Okay, we'll continue. I'm going to ask the Deputy Mayor to read the next resolution.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. From Mayor Spearman, be it resolved that City Council place a question on the October 18th, 2021 general municipal election ballot that reads, do you agree that City Council should approve plans to construct a third bridge prior to 2030 as a municipal capital project priority? And further be it resolved that administration provide objective, neutral, information on the following on the city website. Number 1, expected capital cost. Number 2, current traffic volumes, including peak and non-peak times of day. 3, impact of borrowing required funding on municipal taxes. 4, impact of external grants if received from provincial and or federal governments. 5, expected economic benefit due to construction. And 6, expected economic benefit post-construction. Mayor Spearman.
Thank you. So this is a topic that's always up for discussion. And the purpose of this is not to create a political problem or a political issue. This question, if we put it on the ballot, would be non-binding. And so it would simply give an indication if people wanted the third bridge built sooner rather than later. We have heard in the past from administration the expected capital cost is in the range of $200 million. They have data on the traffic volumes and the peaks, so people can make their own opinion as to that. The impact of borrowing, in the past, our treasurer has said that the impact, if we had to borrow all the money, would have an impact of a 13% increase on municipal taxes. If we were to get provincial grants, for example, if half the cost of the bridge was to be paid for from federal and provincial grants, then of course we might reasonably expect that the impact on taxes might be half of 13.5%. So those are some of the things that I would ask that administration, if this resolution passes, provide objective information on a page so that citizens, voters, could access that objective information and then decide for themselves if this is the right time. So as we know, the project is currently in the capital budget, but not until 2027 with a $4 million preliminary design. So if the $4 million preliminary design proceeds in 2027, it's my understanding the bridge might be built by roughly 2030. So that's currently what the plan is, and so the purpose is to consult with voters and see, consult with residents, give them some say on whether we should move forward with a third bridge sooner rather than later.
I'll open up the floor to questions.
Councillor Carlson?
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Question through you to the mover, Mayor Spearman. Number 3 in the second actionable clause talks about the impact of borrowing, the borrowing and the impact on municipal taxes. And I think we've heard figures bandied around anywhere between 12 and 17% on people's tax notice. Does that include, or would the numbers you're asking to be included, would that include the ongoing costs or ongoing pressures, things like maintenance, snow and ice clearing, et cetera, et cetera? Or is that something that could be added to as a bullet 7?
That could, I'm not sure. I would ask administration to answer the question. I'm not trying to politicize it. Maybe Mr. Matthews, if I could ask the cost of the third bridge, if it had to be financed entirely by municipal taxes, what's the approximate impact on taxes?
Chairman, I don't have that information right now. We'd have to get back to you in regards to that. We just have to get a bit more costing information before I can provide that to you.
And then we'd have to also answer Councillor Carlson's question, is if the ongoing maintenance of the bridge would create another tax pressure as well. Yeah. And what exactly that would be.
Yeah, we would clearly do our best to be complete in identifying whatever those operational costs might be, if there are any associated with it. So it might be another bullet. We'll do that, but if you wanted to be clear, it might be another point to include here about ongoing operational costs.
That would be fine, yeah.
Thank you. Mayor Spearman, if you're open to it, I would add a number 7 then, the ongoing pressure.
Sure.
Ongoing budget pressure.
Any ongoing budget pressures associated with operational maintenance. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
Acting Mayor Croson?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Mayor Spearman, for bringing this forward. I have what I hope is a friendly amendment, but if not accepted as such, I'll bring it forward as a formal amendment. When we were doing CIP, we asked administration to give us a climate change lens on everything. And this, if it does go forward, would be a CIP eventually. So could we add bullet 8 that we would ask to have the greenhouse emissions, how much it would cost in greenhouse emissions on this, as we did for all CIP projects?
Okay. I would accept that as a friendly amendment. It was in all the other CIP submissions. So the impact of estimated impact of greenhouse gases. Yep.
And environmental impact. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the question. It's a good idea and good conversation. My question to you is, obviously, the question is itself, but then the citizens have to do their research and all that. Maybe the question to the city clerk is, how are we going to advertise that you can get this information from the website?
So in answer to that question, just like we advertise who the current possibility or candidates for mayor, council, public schools, separate school, we'll have a page on our website which will have information on the question that was already proposed, and this one if it is also added. We also send out a brochure to every household, which we'll do the day after nomination. So we will include some information, basic information on that, and reference the website, which will have more.
Mr. Mayor, are you expecting a lot of people to go online to do their due diligence? In a perfect world, we hope they do that with everything. I'm looking at most citizens, they go in there and they vote. They're just going to see a question, do you want a third bridge? It's kind of like, it's like going in there, hey, do you want to lose weight? Of course I want to lose weight, but you know the consequence of losing weight, you have to eat less, They go, oh, maybe I don't want to do that. So are you expecting a lot of people to go online? Is that what your hopes are?
Yep, I think they will.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Higgin?
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Thank you for bringing this forward. A question to the city clerk, if I could. We have, we brought up the question regarding the ward system, and there was a comment, and I can't remember who had made it, that the ballot is only so long. You can only get so much information on a ballot. If you have to print an additional ballot, there's a cost involved. Do we still currently have enough space that this could fit on? Because there's 2 referendum questions as well as the ward system. At what point do we have to print another card and that cost comes in?
So right now we do have 2 ballots. One ballot is for the provincial questions, which is on the Senate, on the equalization payment, daylight savings, and what other referendum questions they may ask. So that will be one ballot. The second ballot will be dealing with the municipal issues, which currently are the mayor, selection of council, selection of public school and separate school, and whatever questions council may ask. We won't know until nomination day closes on September 20th at noon if we will have room on the ballot for that. We have already ordered materials for a second ballot, or in that case, 3 ballots in total, so that if need be, we can deal with it on September 20th. So that cost is $25,000, which we think is minimizes the risk for us if that situation arises. So we had stated if there's more than 36, there's actually 34 candidates. If there's more than 34 candidates for any one of those, then we will have to look for additional, another ballot to deal with that.
And we have ordered, so that cost is already incurred with ordering the additional ballots, did you
It
say?
has, but if we don't use it, we'll save it for the next election.
Okay, so that could be, thank you.
Any further questions?
Great. Yes, I'll open it up for debate. Anybody have, I personally will support. This is always a big question every election, and I particularly like the idea of having all the information on a website where we can actually read into it and find out what the actual costs are and how significant they are. So it's a good question to have on the ballot. It's good to bring it out to the public to make their decision. So I will be supporting that. Is there anyone else who wishes to debate?
Councillor Parker's next in the queue.
Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Deputy Mayor. I understand what the mayor is trying to do here, and it's kind of like, do you find this to be important, and so should he move forward with it? And I think most of us have heard as members of council what's important in the community. The only thing I'm concerned about is, once again, the floodgates will open, is why don't we could easily put a list of the 6 projects and circle the top 3 projects that you think are valuable to this community, and then we'd have a good snapshot of what people want to see built in the community. By cherry picking something, it opens up the doors to, well, why didn't you put my project, for example, being a performing arts center, on there as another possible project in this community, showing the costs, the availability of grants. So I'm just concerned. I will support this, Mr. Mayor, because I think it's always the talking point throughout the year, but I'm just concerned that it does open up the floodgates, and I think a lot of people in the community who are living their lives, taking their kids to soccer, doing their due diligence in their lives, may just go to the polls and just see this random question, do you want a bridge? And yeah, we want a 3rd bridge for sure, hoping maybe most likely possibly not doing their due diligence. And I'd hope that they would, but I'm just afraid that some people won't. So that's the thing with every election, with every candidate, of course, too. So that's always the risk. So that's my only concern, but I will support it.
Councillor Morrow is next in the queue.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I share some of the same thoughts as Councillor Parker. You know, we could be, and I know that there are some members of the community that would probably love that we asked, you know, do we want a performing arts center? Should have we spent the money on Exhibition Park, on all these major capital costs? The problem that I have with that is that in order to do that, and in order to get someone to either say yes or no, they need to have all the facts, all the information. And I just don't think we can do that by a question on a ballot box. I believe that we're elected, and you know we hear what the community is telling us. Look, we just debated for an hour on whether we should spend $500,000 on eliminating weeds in medians and boulevards. Maybe we should put that on a ballot. Like we can pick and choose. The other thing that really bothers me about this is that, number one, we're expecting people to go online and research this. Well, people have lives. People, and a lot of them don't even have the technology to access all of this. The other main issue, at best, what do we get? 35% voter turnout? So you're in essence asking 40% of the population to address and answer a question where, you know, it's just not, to me, they won't have all the facts. And I believe that, I think we all listen to the community. I've mentioned, and I think Councillor Parker have been the two of us that have, on every opportunity during the capital, we've always talked about a 3rd bridge, because obviously that's what we hear from the community. Some of my colleagues obviously don't hear that from the community, and so we bring those forward and we vote during the capital projects. So as much as I understand this, as much as I feel that we need to do what we can in any way to involve the community in feedback. I just don't believe that this is the proper way, and I don't believe it will give us the real facts, the real results, and the real, because people are going in there blindly, and they're not all going to have the same facts. Some will have 100% of the details, and some will just see, do I want a third bridge? And for that reason, when you're asking somebody to answer a question like that, I just don't think it's fair. I don't think it's fair to the individuals, because just like we do during public hearings, you got to have all the facts. And so in this case, I just don't think it would work. And so that for that reason, I won't support the resolution.
Is there anyone else who wishes to debate? Councillor Higgin?
Thank you, Mayor Spearman, and thank you for bringing this forward. It's definitely been a hot topic, I know, in the times that I've ran for council, and it seems to be the most common asked question. Now, looking at some of the questions that could be asked on the website, concern I have is in there, and I know we can keep adding 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, but we really don't have much about, really digging deep into other alternative funding methods. And I do see that we have down expected capital cost, but some of the pressures, and I really like this. I think it's important to get this on a ballot, and I really believe that that's your intention is exactly to do that, which I think is wonderful. And it's just I share the similar concerns maybe or comments of Councillor Parker, that Councillor Moore, that how is everybody going to find out all of the detailed information? And going in, and as Councillor Parker said, do you want to lose weight? Well, absolutely. Well, here's what you need to do. That's some of the concerns I see coming from this, because I really like the idea of it coming forward, but it will, I believe, bring a floodgate, because I was thinking the same thing with a performing arts center. And so that may very well comes back as well. So I will support this, because I do think it is part of the process. I just hope that we can get the engagement out there.
Anybody else? I see no one else in the queue.
Then I will leave it to you, Mr. Spearman, to close debate.
Thank you. I think there might be another good reason to have this question on the ballot. And that reason would be, if there is a strong endorsement from the citizens of Lethbridge to have a third bridge, the possibility of getting external funding, if 75% of the people say, we want a third bridge, what provincial representative is going to say no? What provincial government's going to say no? So this could actually be a very good political way of getting something and ultimately relieving the cost to taxpayers down the road. When I've had discussions with various provincial governments, they've said that bridge is entirely within the city of Lethbridge. That is not a provincial bridge, that's a municipal bridge. And us getting external funding could be a challenge. Not impossible, but could be a challenge. But having the citizens express that a third bridge is a significant priority for the city of Lethbridge would be a good feather or a good arrow in the arsenal of the next council if they're talking to the provincial government. So I think it would be educational, first of all, for the citizens, but could be a political asset if this motion is successful. So that's what I put forward, and that's my close.
Well, the vote has been called. I'll ask the clerk to take a roll call.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Campbell?
In favor.
Mayor Spearman?
In favor.
Councillor Carlson?
In favor.
Councillor Kaufman?
Opposed.
Councillor Higgin?
In favor.
Councillor Morrow?
Opposed.
Councillor Miyashiro?
Opposed.
Councillor Parker?
Favor.
Deputy Mayor Croson?
In favor.
Motion's carried 6-3.
Thank you. It's 3:58. We have a public hearing at 4 o'clock. We'll recess to the public hearing. Okay, we'll now move on to the public hearings. I think we have quorum, no? Yeah, good. Do we need to do a roll call or not? Okay, go ahead.
Mayor Spearman,
Present?
Councillor Carlson,
Present.
Councillor Kaufman sent his regrets. He said he wouldn't be here for the public hearing.
Okay.
Councillor Higgin,
Present.
Councillor Morrow,
Yeah.
Councillor Mayashiro,
Here.
Councillor Parker.
Here.
Acting Mayor Croson,
Here.
Deputy Mayor Campbell.
Here.
8 of the council members are in attendance.
Okay, thank you. I call to order the public hearing for bylaw 6128, Land Use Bylaw Amendment re 2200 44th Avenue North, Black Wolf 2. The procedure for this hearing will be, we will begin by calling upon Tyson Boylan, Senior Community Planner, to provide the background to the case. Anyone else who wishes to speak on this bylaw will then be called upon. We will then ask 3 times if there is anybody else who wishes to make a presentation. City Council will then have the opportunity to ask questions of any of the presenters. The hearing will then be closed. Consideration of second and third reading will be made by City Council immediately following the public hearing. I now call upon Mr. Tyson Boylan to provide the background to the case. Mr. Boylan?
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. This is bylaw 6128. It's a proposed land use bylaw amendment to the eastern part of Black Wolf 2. Next slide, please. So my presentation today will cover the relevant information regarding the land use bylaw amendment, including a look at previous planning documents, the existing zoning, and this proposed rezoning. It will also give an evaluation of the proposed amendment. It will conclude with our department's recommendation to City Council. Next slide, please. So the applicant is Brown and Camille and Associates, who are acting on behalf of the developer, who's BW2 Developments Limited. A representative from the developer is here today and is available to answer questions after I'm done. The proposed amendment is to allow for new low and medium density residential development and a stormwater pond, as is indicated in the Black Wolf 2 outline plan. Next slide, please. So the amendment area is in the far north of the city, which is shown as a red star above here. Next slide. And the amendment area is located in the eastern half of Black Wolf 2, as is shown on this more detailed map, as the hatched area. Black Wolf 2 is located between Black Wolf 1 to the east and the Legacy Ridge and Hardyville to the west. The Royal View ASP area, shown here as the Burbage Farms development area, is located immediately to the north. Next slide, please. So here's a more detailed look at the amendment area, which is outlined in green on the air photo. And the amendment area is undeveloped at this time, as you can see, as is the area to the north. Legacy Park is located to the south, and Uplands Boulevard is located to the east. Next slide, please. So here's a photo taken on the ground of the site, looking northwest from the intersection of Uplands Boulevard and Black Wolf Boulevard. The amendment area is just past this corner and in the background behind the large sign here. Next slide. So this photo is taken again from the ground. It was taken from Black Wolf Boulevard, looking east across the amendment area. The existing Black Wolf 1 can be seen in the far background here. And next slide. So here are the relevant planning documents to this proposed rezoning. And this demonstrates the planning work that has been done to date for the neighborhood and how the neighborhood plans need to comply with the cities and the province's overarching planning documents. I also must point out that the Black Wolf Stage 2 outline plan was recently amended by MPC in May of this year to allow for this rezoning. Next slide, please. So the Hardyville Legacy Ridge Uplands ASP concept map, which displays the general neighborhood layout and land uses, is shown here. The red circle corresponds to the amendment area, which was a tenant for low density residential with some medium density residential within this plan as well. Next slide, please. And here's the concept map from the Black Wolf 2 outline plan, which is more detailed than the ASP is. Again, low density residential is the primary land use in the outline plan area, with some medium density shown on Uplands Boulevard. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the existing land use on the left and the proposed land use on the right, just to compare them side by side. The proposed RM district is shown in pink and will allow for planned low-density residential development, such as single detached dwellings and secondary suites. RM has also been used extensively in Black Wolf 1, located to the east. The R37 district is shown in yellow and can be used to construct townhouses or even duplexes at medium densities up to 37 units per hectare. The PR district is shown in green and is used for parks and utility facilities, such as the storm pond that will be required to serve this development. Next slide, please. So the application was evaluated in terms of different planning documents, including the South Saskatchewan Regional Plan, and it fulfills this. Next slide, please. The application was a little unique as first reading actually occurred on June 29th, just prior to the new 2021 MDP being adopted. So we evaluated in terms of both the 2010 ICSP and the new 2021 MDP. Both MDPs looked at housing affordability, providing a mix of housing types and increased densities in new neighborhoods. This proposed rezoning will help to fulfill this. Next slide, please. So in terms of the governing ASP and outline plan, the proposed amendment is in compliance with the land uses that are described and shown in these plans. The proposed rezoning matches the land use that is shown in the most recent version of the outline plan, and it will also help to achieve its planned density and will allow for secondary suites and locations as specified in this outline plan. Next slide, please. So the proposed rezoning is also in line with the municipal housing strategy, as it identified building new medium density housing and secondary suites as one way to help increase the diversity of housing stock in the city. And the developer also worked with city staff to ensure that the zoning is most appropriate for the proposed development and that no technical issues were identified by city staff. Next slide, please. So for notification, mailers were sent out to 41 owners of the parcel shown on the green hatched areas above. Ads also appeared on the Herald, and this was also advertised on the city's website. I received calls and emails from two parties asking for more information, which was then provided to them. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, bylaw 6.28 is compliant with all existing statutory and approved plans for the area, including both the previous and the newly adopted MDPs, as well as the recently amended outline plan. Next slide. And it is our recommendation that City Council approve this bylaw. Thank you.
Are there any members of the public that wish to make a presentation on this matter? Okay. I'm going to ask two more times. Is there any member of the public that wishes to make a presentation on this matter? And for a third and final time, is there any member of the public that wishes to make a presentation on this matter? Hearing now no other presenters, it is now time for City Council to ask questions of any of the presenters. Councillor Carlson?
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. I wasn't sure. I saw Mr. Hogewad was on the call. I wasn't sure if he had a presentation or is just here to answer any questions.
Your Worship, I'm just here to answer questions, as Mr. Boylan had provided actually what I feel a very good presentation with respect to what we propose to do in Black Wolf 2.
Excellent.
That's
Thank
Mr.
you.
Hogewad, right? Yeah. Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank
Welcome.
you,
Nice to see you.
And maybe this is to Mr. Hogewad or Mr. Boylan. In some of our sheets, it does talk about age-friendly communities and how this design will positively impact aging in place. Is that at the forefront of the design of this community, or is it just something that could happen as a result?
I'll let the applicant describe that, Mr. Hogewad.
Really, the whole development actually contains lots of mixed housing and the ability to in fact move from one to the other through time. In other words, you could be in a semi-detached or a townhouse, then the community still holds in a single family. So in fact, you can move through the whole process and really remain in the community and have access to all amenities that are there, because you'd have no reason to move with respect to having a beautiful park across the street. So it does do that. It's not isolated to just one land use or one part of that.
Okay, thank you. So it was a thoughtful design or zoning decision on your part, Mr. Hogwood?
It's actually been part of Black Wolf One in it, and actually took and created this flexibility within it to be able to provide this kind of housing. And in fact, in Black Wolf One, it's going to have all of those kinds of things right now. In other words, there's an apartment block being built, which actually those folks, they look forward to those folks actually moving into different, as they can upscale their living accommodation.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Spearman.
Are there any questions, other questions from council? I see none. If there's no other questions, I now declare the public hearing closed. This matter may be decided later this afternoon following the public hearing. We'll now move on to public hearing for bylaw 6301. I call to order the public hearing for bylaw 6301, a bylaw to provide for the closing of certain roads. The procedure for this hearing will be, we will begin by calling upon Donald C., Corporate Land Administrator, to provide the background to the case. Anyone else who wishes to speak on this bylaw will then be called upon. We will then ask 3 times if there is anybody else who wishes to make a presentation. City Council will then have the opportunity to ask questions of any of the presenters. The hearing will then be closed. Consideration of second and third reading will be made by City Council immediately following the public hearing. I now call upon Mr. Donald C. to provide the background to the case. Welcome, Mr. C.
Thank you, Your Worship and members of Council. I'm here to present to you the proposed road closure bylaw 6301. Next slide, please. The applicant for this road closure is the Transportation Department. The intent of bylaw 6301 is to close a portion of road plan 42758Q road right-of-way, also known as 4th Avenue North. If this bylaw is approved, it allows the applicant to consolidate the closed area to their property. Next slide, please. The proposed road closure is located north of Lethbridge, as you can see on this map on this slide. The proposed road closure is within the red circle. Next slide, please. As we zoom a little closer, the closed area is between 5th Avenue North and Crow's Nest Trail and west of 7th Street North. The property outlined in purple is the city's public operation north site, and the area shown in yellow hash lines is the proposed closed area. The closed area is about 1.19 acres, more or less, portion of road plan 4275AQ road right-of-way, also known as 4th Avenue North. Next slide, please. Currently, the proposed closed area serves as a private driveway and access to the city's public operation north site. The public operation north site is looking to improve the security, so they'll be adding a fence around their site and a gate to the gates to the entrances. Note that the gate to the entrances will be open during business hours and will be closed during non-business hours. Next slide, please. So we reviewed this proposed closure with transportation, and it's confirmed that the area is surplus to the city, and administration completed internal circulation and found no issues to the closure. Next slide, please. Bylaw 6301 was given first reading on June 29th, 2021. this bylaw and public hearing information appeared in the public notice of the Lethbridge Herald on July 3rd and 10th of 2021 for 2 consecutive weeks. Public hearing notice were sent and no comments or issue received to date. Next slide, please. So we're here because there's 3 sections in the MGA which relate to the control of the road right-of-ways within the city. The first one is section 16.2 states that the title to all roads within the city is vested in city, and section 18.1 states the city has the control of all roads within its boundary, and section 22.1 states that council must pass a bylaw to close a road right-of-way within the city. Next slide, please. And to conclude, we recommend City Council to support bylaw 6301 at second and third reading. Thanks.
Okay, any questions for Mr. C? Wait, I guess I have to ask, are there any members of the public that wish to make a presentation on this matter? For a second time, are there any members of the public that wish to make a presentation on this matter? And for a third and final time, are there any members of the public that wish to make a presentation on this matter? Okay. Hearing no other presenters, it is now time for City Council to ask questions of the presenter. Questions? I see no questions. Okay. Hearing none, I will declare the public hearing closed. The matter may be decided later this afternoon following the public hearing. Thank you, Mr. C. Okay, we're going to revert to the City Council meeting, and that could take a few minutes. I could. Okay, we're ready to go. Okay, Black Wolf. I have a resolution from Councillor Carlson. Bylaw 6128, Land Use Amendment re 2200 44th Avenue North, Black Wolf 2. For second reading, be it resolved that Bylaw 6128, Land Use Amendment re 2200 44th Avenue North, Black Wolf 2, be given second reading, and the Mayor and the City Clerk be authorized to sign and seal the same. Councillor Carlson?
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. We did just have a public hearing on this, but I'll ask if there's any questions from my colleagues.
Okay. Are there any questions from council? Can anybody see the screen? I can't. There's no questions from council? Okay. There are none.
You,
okay, thank you.
Mayor Spearman, I'd ask for my colleagues' support of this. It is rezoning this section of land from FUD to mixed density residential, medium density residential, and parks and rec to allow for storm pond as well. One of the exciting things in this design outlay, as Mr. Hogelwide presented, was the design for an age-friendly community that can at least allow for the transition towards different living accommodations and still able to remain aging in place or staying in place through choice. So I'd ask for my colleagues' support.
Okay, thank you. No further questions from council. Any debate? I see none. All in favor? Are any opposed? I hear none. Thank you. And for third reading, be it resolved that bylaw 6128, Land Use Amendment Re 2200 44th Avenue North, Black Wolf 2, be given third reading, and the mayor and the city clerk be authorized to sign and seal the same. Councillor Carlson?
I'll call for the vote.
Question's been called. All in favor? Any opposed? There are none. Thank you. And I have another resolution sponsored by Councillor Parker, bylaw to provide for the closing of certain roads. For second reading, be it resolved that bylaw 6301, a bylaw to provide for the closing of certain roads, be given second reading, and the mayor and the city clerk be authorized to sign and seal the same. Councillor Parker?
I don't think, first of all, I don't think there's any questions. Otherwise, they would have been asked a few minutes ago. But if there are any questions?
Are there any questions?
Being none, okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, we just had the public hearing just a few minutes ago. It was advertised. There was an opportunity for people to speak. There was no concerns or queries brought forward. This is a piece of land, and the applicant is our transportation department, and it's land within the corporation, and it is owned by the city. And it just, I just ask for council's support.
Okay. Any debate? I see none. All in favor? And for third reading from Councillor Parker, be it resolved that bylaw 6301, a bylaw to provide for the closing of certain roads, be given third reading, and the mayor and the city clerk be authorized to sign and seal the same. Councillor Parker? Question's been called. All in favor? Any opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, we're on to inquiries. Were there any written inquiries? There's no written inquiries. On to...
I was...
So, Mayor Spearman, there was an inquiry that was submitted today, and let me just find it, sorry. The question was asked to give an update on the grasshopper situation, and I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, so I believe administration will have to do some research on that. The issues just come up on the weekend as to there are concerns from some residents in West Lethbridge in certain areas, basically Sunridge, about grasshopper infestations, and I think we'll need to do some research before it can be responded to. Mr. Dalton?
Yeah, that's correct, Your Worship. We are working on this issue now, but we do have work to do, so we'll come back to council with an update on that.
And if there's any developments, we have the contact information of the residents who've expressed concern.
Yes, and we'll be getting back to all those residents that have reached out directly.
Thank you. Okay. And there'll be a follow-up report to council at the next meeting. No. Thank you. Are there city council updates? So updates from committees? I think I heard earlier today that I think it was Councillor Kaufman was going to provide an update.
Councillor Kaufman is not here right now.
Anyone?
Actually, it was from me. I was hoping Councillor Carlson, Deputy Mayor Campbell would update everybody from the barbecue in Cohurst on some of the things we learned from the AUMA president, if he remembers those. That would be very informative for council. Go ahead.
The hamburgers were really good, that's for sure. It was a very informal sit down. Mr. Morishita is this is his last term, and he just wanted to meet with a number of constituents. And really, he didn't unless Councillor Crowson, there was anything specific that you wanted to bring up, but he never really got into many big deals about what he wanted to pass on, other than wishing us goodwill in the.
Well, he did mention the MSI replacement.
Oh, right, that's right.
Local government funding framework. Right.
Yeah.
Which will be, there's not a lot of details on it yet, but just to be aware that MSI will be coming out in a new version. And they're still trying to figure out how the next 2 years of MSI will work as well. So no, he didn't have some details, but there were great conversations, and there were councillors there from other communities. And the one thing I would say that they were most requesting, of course, all the councils will be different in the fall, is they are really hoping that whatever councils there are in November will reach out and create some regional conversations early in their terms, because there are certainly some ideas that could be developed across. Certainly the pandemic made that more difficult in this term, but that was one of the conversations, was we need to really start talking across the region as much as possible. I know the mayors and Reeves do, but this was coming from the councillors.
That's great. Anything else? Okay, with that, we'll move on to the closed meeting motions. I have a resolution from Councillor Morrow, omnibus motion 10.1 and 10.2. Be it resolved that Council direct that the closed meeting discussions with respect to Human Resources Matter number 1 and Human Resources Matter number 2 remain confidential pursuant to Section 24, Advice from Officials of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Councillor Morrow?
Question?
Question's been called. All in favor? Any opposed? There are none. Thank you. And finally, I have a resolution from Councillor Carlson. For adjournment, be it resolved that we now adjourn the regular meeting of City Council until Tuesday, August the 10th, 2021.
Question.
Question's been called. All in favor? Any opposed? There are none. Thank you. We are adjourned.
I guess we don't have to tell Councillor Kaufman, because he's not here, to step down his teams.
Tell him he missed the best part of the meeting.